I'd like to call this City Council meeting to order. If I could call on staff for our national anthem, and if you're able, please rise.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command, car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
And at this time, if I could call on Councillor Hoyle for our land acknowledgement.
Niagara region is situated on treaty land. The land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Union. There are many nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island who live and work in Niagara today. The City of Port Colborne stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the land on which we live.
Great, thank you, Councillor. To adopt the agenda, if I could have Councillors Acqualine and Beauregard move the agenda for this evening. Are there any changes, additions? All in favor? That's carried. Disclosures of interest this evening. Councillor Danch.
Got a conflict on
Microphone.
Sorry, I've got a conflict on the one item there, 12 point, what is it, I'm sorry? 12.3? A, I'm a property owner on Main Street with a vacant lot. That's my conflict on that item.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Beauregard.
Your Worship, I have a conflict on item 4.3 of September 18th meeting to consider the Northland Estates drain. My conflict, I, Eric Beauregard, declare an indirect pecuniary interest as my employer, Upper Canada Consultants, is the agent for the owners of the Northland Estates subdivision.
Great, thank you, Councillor. And I have a conflict with also, as Councillor Danch, with item 12.3A for vacant land amendment to 2024 water and wastewater bylaw 2024-177, as I own property on King Street. And at that time, I'll pass that portion over to Deputy Mayor Bodner. Any other disclosures of interest? Seeing none. We will now go to the microphone over on my right. So it gives me great pleasure this evening to recognize a team that we looked up to when I was a lot younger than these guys that are, some of them that are here with us tonight. They will be gathering, and Regional Councillor Fred Davies will be talking a little bit more about this. But back in the days of early high school and senior public, with what we had back then, is grade 7 and 8, these fellows were able to go to Sweden, and the amount of money it cost them in the day doesn't seem like a lot today, but if you actually make it in today's dollars, it's a lot of money it cost. So if I could have Fred Davies come forward. So as everybody knows, Fred's our regional councillor for the City of Port Colborne, and we're thrilled to have him with us this evening, not only in his capacity as regional councillor, but as a member of the Port Colborne Lions Bantam traveling team, Team Port Colborne. 50 years ago, in 1974, he and his teammates, aged 14 and 15, traveled to Sweden as Team Port Colborne. Councillor Davies, we're going to ask that you take us back at this time and share some of the memories of this trip.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 1 second, I just got it.
While he's doing that, you'll notice there's going to be some rotating shots from back in the day.
I'm going to put some props up if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor.
Certainly.
This is the jersey we wore and a jacket that we would exchange with some of the players from Sweden, which I'd invite you all to take a look at, but I'm going to hand this up to everybody because I've been holding on to this for 50 years. This is an insert that went into, I think it was the Port Colborne News at the time in 1974. I've been holding on to this for quite some time. And I realized the other day when I was packing up some stuff that I had this all sitting there for a long time and I was going to throw it out. Luckily, it never hit the garbage and I was able to retrieve it tonight. So,
It's gotta be pretty delicate, those things.
I know, eh?
So this is the 50 years. I want to introduce a couple of special people, a bunch of special people. Doug Brown was our trainer for the team. He was only a couple of years older than us at the time. Gasper Paul was on our team, John Pagetto, Greg Krahulik, and myself. We were a small portion of the team, but after, in the summer of 1974, we spent the summer slugging newspapers, collecting cans, fundraising for this special trip to Sweden. It was sort of a post-1972 Canada-Russia level of enthusiasm that it sort of enveloped the community. And Sam Burkout, who many of you may remember as a local realtor, was sort of the brains behind it. He organized the whole thing from start to finish, and it was a flawless trip. But over that summer period, we fundraised for our tickets to get over, and none of us at the time were guaranteed a spot on the team because the tryouts weren't until September. So we worked our butts off during that summer to raise funds for this, and our parents were there. All of our parents kicked in on some things, like one of the mothers sewed our names on the back of our sweaters, which at the time was really special because only the Leafs got their names on the back at the time. But and another parent knitted toques for us. We were the first team, I swear to God, we were the first team in Niagara that we had matching gloves, matching helmets, pants.
We had everything.
We had everything.
Except skates.
Yeah. So the team we were legendary at the time. And at 14, when you're a legend at 14, it goes to your head. But we had a blast in Sweden, and we went 5-1-1. And there's the team when we came back from Sweden. Yeah, we all had matching jackets, bow ties. They were kind of red velvet, weren't they, or blue velvet, something like that. Blue velvet. Yeah, and I was reminded that we had these long winter jackets that were all matching as well. I mean, it was a production. But I want to actually turn it over to Brownie. I know Brownie was our trainer. Jack Stover, who was our coach, is. No, I thought you were the trainer and the trainer. Second in command. Anyway, and Jack Stover, our coach, is coming to the celebration, which, by the way, we're having a Club C on Steele Street on October the 5th. On October the 4th, we're doing a team reunion at the Breakwell place I think I know down the street.
Somewhere.
Yeah. But anyway, Brownie, come on in.
No, come on up here.
Guys from that year, they came out to our tryouts. Basically, we started the tryouts at the start of the summer. Anybody that wanted to be on the team had to attend workouts at the high school field. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And we also had the Inco Hall. That's where this was the first hockey team that ever had as much talking about the game and how to play it, as opposed to being on the ice and just playing. One important thing about every kid on the team was from Port Colborne. If you're involved in any kind of minor hockey now, you play all over. We've got kids playing AAA hockey in all age divisions. My own grandson plays. He's from Port Colborne, but he plays on the A team in Welland. So it's like that. You never get this again. And so all I'm saying is it's tough. We've had some tough times too with this team. Out of the 16 kids, we've already had 3 that have passed. And if you look at a guy like me, that's hard to see these kids. But anyway, one of their important things, they were all gentlemen in Sweden. Here's the key factor. Back then, you stayed with families in Sweden. Each one of them stayed with a family. And the next year when they came back, we billeted them. How could you ever imagine that today? And, telling a few stories on these boys. I can remember over in Sweden when we were invited for games and then meals and stuff, there's only one washroom over in Sweden. So there's no male or female, it's the washroom. So you had to take care of these guys. But anyway, we mourn the loss of Nicky Forte, Robbie Lanavelle, and Joe Stenberg. If you remember Joe, he was the guy that used to ride the 3-wheel bicycle around Port Colborne. Had some issues with his life. But other than that, these guys have been tremendous citizens. They're all good-looking guys still. I guess we're all hockey players. We don't have hair. And from that team, we had kids go on. We had 3 get drafted for the junior A teams in Ontario. Gasper himself played for the farm team of the Toronto Maple Leafs. John, you played in Peterborough?
Yep.
Did you go any higher?
Into the eye.
Into the eye? You haven't seen Pagetto. This is a Pagetto. And Greg Krahulik?
Nope, didn't go any farther. College hockey, that was...
What's your brother doing these days? He was a good hockey
Yeah, he was
player,
good.
too. Yeah. And Freddie became the politician. Anyway, that team made it because it was a Port Colborne effort. Every service club and the Legion and everything, they just did so much for us and gave us, free dance hall at the Legion and provided food for us.
Free bowling at the Inco Bowling Alley.
Free bowling at the Inco.
Set your own pins, that was a good one too.
That's true.
Yeah.
So anyway, all I want to say is, you know what, too? These guys played against probably the best hockey player that ever was. And they beat him. If you just keep watching the things, it's going to come back up. They beat Gretzky in Brantford.
Yeah, but
and
that was Nick Forte, because we put him on as a shadow. Every time Gretzky was on the ice, Nick Forte was on the ice, and that was it. Held him
Scoreless.
I think he was big and strong. And
Or no goals, he had 3 assists, but no goals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the headline, which says Gretzky held scoreless, although, he got 20 assists. Guys, anybody?
No, say a few words, Fred.
Come on up.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank Fred and Greg for organizing this. This is a wonderful, and Ken, pardon me. It's a wonderful opportunity here for us to celebrate such a great time of our lives. Mayor Steele, thank you for honoring us here, and I thank everybody else for taking the time to hear. A couple things that I want to touch on is, boy, if you look back at then, there was no technology. We didn't know what we were doing, but the leaders in our community gathered everybody together and put a young group of kids together, took us overseas, all the things that we accomplished in hockey. We beat Gretzky. We did great things. We went all Ontario, I believe, that year as well. We had a great season. We're a great group of teams. But the biggest thing are the intangibles that we learned that we didn't even realize that we were learning. Every one of us took so many things from the game, built great lives. And that's just the result of everything we learned in the community, everything we learned from parents, leaders, and we can't thank our people who put that together enough. It gave us such a foundation for a wonderful life, so it's a great opportunity, and it served us all well. Thank you kindly.
Thanks, Casper. If I can say
go ahead.
a few words. At the Port Colborne 100-year reunion last September, I took my 92-year-old mother as a date because she was a graduate of Port High. So we walked over from Portal Village, and I met John and Ken. I walked right by John, and I saw Ken, and we said, well, I think it was John said, we got the 50-year coming up. I said, well, why don't we get together and set up a golf tournament? So that's where it started. It was just three of us going, well, let's just get together, see how many people want to come to Port Country Club, and we'll play 18 holes, and that was it. And then Fred got involved. And, everything shot through the roof. We got to do this and this. And so we went with golf tournament, and now we've got a dinner, and we've got memorabilia, and we're in front of you right now, which is wild.
Yeah.
We're waiting for the parade, which I'm hoping the mayor's going to say. Do we have a parade?
Yeah, we could.
I kept pushing for that with Fred, but I don't know where that is. The one memory that I have when on our way there, I can remember we were on a 747 SAS, Scandinavian Airlines flight, and we're all in one big section. I can still see it. And we have those old plastic headphones that you used to put on, and they actually piped in the music through the headphones. And I went to the bathroom, and as I came back, I knew that they were playing Bachman Turner Overdrive, You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet. Because everybody's sitting back with their recliner, the whole team, you ain't seen nothing yet. And everybody did it all in sync, so I can still see that. The only other memory was, I think it was our first or second game, we played outside. And I didn't know if we knew that going in, but we were playing in an outdoor game. And we're trying to figure out how to stay warm, and it was butt cold. And you see the NHL playing outdoors. And that's fine. But we didn't know. And we went outside, and it was a snowstorm. And they had this sort of Zamboni scoop that the guy stood on and pushed with two wheels and a blade and going around, and you couldn't see. You were cold, you were wet, you were this. Amazing. To come into that, I'll always remember that. Thank you.
Can I take 1 second?
Certainly.
Going back to what Greg was talking about, well, I was in net, so I froze. But to get to the ice surface, wooden skate guards that clipped on, and then you had to walk to the door. Now try that being a goalie, and then pop these off, and every 10 minutes, the plow came out. And I don't know if the article's here, but I have a picture at home with giant snowflakes coming down. But one of the biggest things is just watch, you'll see the snowflakes on one of the pictures. It was very similar to that, but one of the things that we never knew as youngsters is how everybody in the community gave back. Well, it just, all of a sudden, I think in our later lives, it comes out. I coached for 20 years. Unfortunately, it wasn't here. It was Niagara Falls, and it was with the Canucks, but I coached Junior B. I coached Single A. Without saying anything to my kids, they both coach. So it was something we learned but never realized. And it was really cool how you thought about it later, went, where did I get that from? From everybody who supported us. Thanks.
Good. So at this time, we do have a proclamation, and I'm going to ask Councillors Bagu and Hoyle to move. Whereas 50 years ago, a committee led by Sam Burkout and the Port Colborne Lions organized a hockey exchange to Sweden with an all-star team of 14 and 15-year-olds. And whereas the plan was to send a Port Colborne team to Sweden where the boys would play a host of Swedish teams, then invite a team from Sweden to Canada to play teams from across Niagara. And whereas for almost an entire year before the trip, Team Port Colborne boosters organized draws, dances, bake sales, bottle drives to raise the $17,000 required for transportation, airfare, souvenirs, special dress and equipment, and a banquet for their Swedish hosts. $17,000 in 1974 equates to about $103,000 in 2024. And whereas the trip was considered a huge success, thanks to organizers, sponsors, family, and friends of Team Port Colborne, who played to a stellar record of 6 wins, 1 loss, and 1 tie. And whereas Coach Jack Stover, manager Hank Boyer, and trip organizer Sam Burkout were proud of their players who conducted themselves admirably as ambassadors of our city, our region, and our country, it was an experience of a lifetime. Now, therefore, to mark the 50th anniversary of Team Port Colborne Bantam All-Star Team, trip to Sweden in 1974, I, Mayor William C. Steele, hereby proclaim the week of October, or the first week of October, as Team Port Colborne Week. Thank you. Throw it there. Thank you. And also, well, just a sec, before we go to that, we also have a little memento for these guys. All I tell you is just don't lift it up by the top. Presented to the Team Port Colborne Bantam All-Stars on their 50th anniversary as a hockey ambassadors to Sweden. It lists the whole team and their crew: Hank Boyer, Jack Stover, Doug Brown. Directors of the day were Bev Davies, Henry Ruska, Freddie Hunold, Doug Malloy, Valley Ravando, John Williston. The Booster Club was Sam Burkout, Charlie Gatt, Jack Stover, Carl Turton, Jack Hopkins, Dave Scott. And then the All-Stars were Fred Davies, Jamie Dewar, Lenny Doan, Johnny Ferresi, Nicky Forte, Mike Gibson, Gary Gruel, Kenny Haruska, Mike Hyde, Greg Krahulik, Robbie Lanavel, Johnny Pagetto, Gasper Paul, Jeff Provincial, Chris Ravando, Joey Stenberg, and Kerry Wolston.
That's awesome.
So we'll present that to you guys.
Thank you so much. That's awesome, Bill. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Look at that. Thanks. It's like passing down the Stanley Cup.
Pretty close. Councillor Bruno.
Gentlemen, I was just wondering, like, what, was it the 72 series that got people thinking about going abroad? Was there an individual that sort of was the impetus behind doing this?
Yeah, it really wasn't. The Welland juvenile team went over the previous year. And Jack had the dream of doing this. And, you know, Jack was like a legend in hockey in Port Colborne. He didn't just go to his team's games. He went to the others up and down. And I remember when he said it was like a year before, like and I goes, how are you going to run? How are we going to get the money to do this to go? He goes, we got to do it that year because that's when the best kids are going to be available. The younger ones plus the mix of the older ones.
Good to know.
And Jack says, okay. And then smart enough, Hank was a good businessman too. Hank Boyer, he was a newspaper man. And we knew enough to get Burkout involved. And Sam took it on like a job and flew over a couple times and made all the arrangements and made the contact with the OMHA because we had to have 2 OMHA reps with us. And also we had 2 reporters, Rob Paxton from the Tribune and do you remember the other guy from the Port News?
Carl Turt?
No, was a German name. But anyway, yeah, so it was a big deal. And it was so great because Stover and I, all we had to do was worry about the kids.
But the Tribune got the updates every game. They got the scores, and the score got the complete thing. So it was posted.
Yeah, so they were fully outfitted.
Let's do a photograph of everybody out front with the trophy and the proclamation, Fred.
Yeah.
Do you want the jersey?
Yeah, bring the jersey. But don't put my name in it.
Thank you. It's beautiful.
Thanks. Yeah. See you guys next Friday. Saturday Athletic. So, council, just before we move on, we need to vote on the proclamation. It was duly moved and seconded. I assume there's no more questions with regards to the proclamation. All those in favor? That's carried. So next, council, we do have a public meeting under the Development Charges Act. So council is holding a public meeting under sections 12 of the Development Charges Act 1997 as amended. The purpose of the meeting is to give the public an opportunity to ask questions, provide comments, and make representation on the 2024 Development Charges Background Study. This study calculates new development charges for roads, public works, facilities and fleet, fire protection services, park and recreation, library services, water and wastewater services, and growth studies. So if I can call on Mr. Long to introduce our consultant, and then we can go through that through their presentation and then take questions from both council and the public.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Council. I'm pleased to introduce the lead consultant from Watson & Associates, Mr. Byron Tan, who's here to give a presentation on the findings of the development charge background study. I just wanted to note that a city project team comprised of staff from pretty much all of the city divisions and departments has been working on this project since September of 2023. And it's been great working with that project team and Brian Bowles and Steve Schapowski and others. And it's also been a pleasure working with Byron Tan and Jamie Cook, as well as Taylor at Watson & Associates. So, Mr. Tan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gary. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, staff, and the public. While my presentation will be nowhere near as entertaining as the prior presentation, hopefully you could bear with me as we go through these slides. Now, typically, I mean, this is a formal meeting, a formal public meeting under the Development Charges Act. However, if there are any questions, in between any of my slides, please feel free to ask. However, I do find that, a question really is a segue to the following slide or two. And, at the end of the day, I'm more than happy to take all the questions as well after. So, at your pleasure. So just for tonight, as Mr. Long has mentioned, it is a formal public meeting under the Development Charges Act. I'll provide you a little bit of an overview with respect to, the purpose, why we're here. Obviously, it's a refresh or at least an update to your 2019 Development Charge Background Study. For members of council that, may not remember or recall, what transpired in the previous DC, I'll provide a little bit of a overview of the legislation that's been updated really over the last 5 years. I won't go too much into the minutiae of each individual line item, but at least kind of give you a broad overview as to what we've had to include as part of our analysis for 2024. Subsequent to that, I'll provide you a little bit of the findings of the background study. So we'll go through a little bit of the growth forecasts, provide you with some of the draft policies that we're putting forth in front of council, and as well as the draft rates. And then end it off with a comparator of yourselves on your calculation relative to everyone else within the region. Now, Keep in mind, this is a public meeting to receive input, so no decisions need to be made tonight. This is just for the opportunity for yourselves and the public to be able to ask questions. So just to recap, or at least provide the public with the purpose of the DC, the development charge background study, it's a mandatory item that needs to be undertaken in order for municipalities to enact or at least pass a development charge bylaw. We're here today to undertake the mandatory public meeting. So in between the release of the background study and council's consideration of the bylaw, we must hold a public meeting, again, to gain input from yourselves as well as the public. And this will meet our statutory timelines. Under the Development Charges Act, we do need to release the background study a minimum of 60 days, so 2 months, prior to council considering the bylaw. That allows time for the public, staff, council to be able to at least digest the information, ask any questions, and really provide that 2-month period in order to review everything. So just a little bit of the overview of the timelines and where we started and where we're at today. We were retained by the city to undertake the development charge background study back on September 2023. Since that time, we've worked with, again, city staff, your consultants for various other planning or, planning-related studies. We've also met with the stakeholder community and development community to provide them with an overview as to what is occurring within Port Colborne and what type of projects that we're trying to undertake and pay for under the development charge regime. So you can see here, from that process, we had the stakeholder meeting back on May 1st. Provided them some draft rates, draft policies, received their feedback at that time. And subsequent to that, there's been some new information, that was released to the public. You have more infrastructure works required for certain companies that may be coming to the city, as well as other growth items that we've uncovered through working with your planning consultants as well as the city staff. So we've then updated all of the information and released it as part of the August 23rd background study. So it is public, it's on your website. We're here today, as I said, as part of the mandatory public meeting, and we are anticipating to be back to council on October 22nd so that you may consider the bylaw. And, between that time, if there's any other policy items, that you'd like to consider or update, this is the process for you to be able to provide your responses to staff so that we can update the bylaw prior to that council passage. So again, just a bit of an overview, what development charges are. They are a revenue tool provided to municipalities in order to recover for growth-related residential and non-residential developments. So as you grow as a municipality, there are a number of infrastructure works that you need to undertake in order to service new population, new employment. So this may come into the form of roads, public works vehicles, buildings, fire protection, parks and recreation, etc. So development charges are really meant to capture those growth-related capital costs and then convert that into a charge that you can then impose onto new developments so that you can help pay for these items. And really the driver for this is so that you can reduce the burden on existing taxpayers and ratepayers. So then the charge is diverted directly to the new builds rather than you having to raise your property taxes in order to pay for infrastructure. These capital costs are in addition to what you would normally require a developer or subdivision to build on your behalf. So for example, if a subdivision were to be constructed within a municipality, you would typically require them to build the local roads, local sidewalks, street lights, maybe build a park or parquet within it, stormwater drainage, for a pond. And then once that subdivision is fully built, then you would assume it, and then that would be then part of your city infrastructure. So the development charges are meant to capture all the costs that are above and beyond that. So really more your external work, such as collector roads or arterial roads, maybe oversized water mains. So maybe the internal water mains within these subdivisions only require, 300 millimeter pipes. But then, when you're out in the big streets, maybe you need something larger than that. So it's more of the broader infrastructure that we would include within a development charge background study. And as I mentioned, municipalities are empowered to have DCs. It's not mandatory, but as I said, having to have one then allows you to then offset the cost that you would have to put the burden on existing taxpayers and ratepayers. And typically, development charges are calculated, paid for at the time of building permit. So you don't typically, or you wouldn't issue a building permit until the development charge is payable to ensure that you've received the funds in order to put it to your reserves so that you can pay for future infrastructure. As I mentioned earlier, really the impetus of the DCs is to help pay for new growth. So just this graphic, just to kind of provide you an illustrative approach where if you're going to grow as a municipality or any municipality that grows, as you have new population and new employment, you have new infrastructure that you're required to construct or upgrade. So there's no magic to it. There's only so many revenue streams that a municipality has access to. So if you don't have development charges, which is on the left-hand side, then really your only recourse in order to pay for these infrastructure works are property taxes, water, wastewater rates, existing reserve funds, etc. So again, that just provides an offset to having to increase those other methods of revenue. Just to provide you a little bit of a background on how we calculate this, again, this is isolated or at least summarized into 6 steps. If you ever read the Development Charge Act, it actually has over 80 clauses, hundreds of sub-clauses. Makes for great nighttime reading if you have insomnia. But really I've tried to do is really summarize it into 6 steps where the first one is we identify the amount, type, and location of growth. So this is where we work with your planning staff. We'll work with your official plan, secondary plans, even looking at information, given the fact that you're in a 2-tiered system with the region. We would also look at their numbers as well and try to develop a growth forecast in order to identify, again, the amount, the type of growth, residential or non-residential, and then the location as well. Once we identify the growth forecast, then we start going towards identifying what type of servicing is required to service these new population and employment. So this is where we look at your master plans, looking at your staff reports, capital budgets, working with staff as well to determine what level of service do you currently provide in order to, in your current population, and what do you need to extend to future growth. So that's number 2, where we identify the servicing needs to accommodate that growth. And again, typically it's to maintain your current level of service that you provide. Now, number 3 then says, we identify the capital costs to provide those servicing needs. Sounds very similar to number 2. However, number 3 is the actual specific project. So if number 2 then says, hey, we need to have parks and recreation, then number 3 then says, what type of parks and recreation do we need? Do we want a playground? Do you want a splash pad? Do you want a basketball court? For the DC purposes, it really doesn't matter what you pick, right? You need to provide parks and recreation. It's up to you to decide what type of capital based on your, initiatives and, what you'd like to see within the community. Once we identify those costs, we have to do a number of deductions. This is the province's way of telling you that, DCs are not full cost recovery. You still have to provide, some contribution, at the municipal level. So if there are any grants, subsidies, or other contributions from the province, the feds, or even other entities, we have to subtract those costs, okay, because you're getting monies from other sources. Benefit to existing development, that's basically looking at every single capital project and trying to determine what portion of that project will benefit new growth versus what portion of it will really benefit the existing community. And an example of that may be, you have a fire station right now that's 5,000 square feet. Again, this is a very simplified example. But as we're growing, we now need a 10,000 square foot fire station. Well, if you're going to demolish that first 5 and then build a 10, well, you already had a 5,000 square foot fire station before. So 50% of that fire station that you're building is benefit to existing. It's not really for growth because you already had it. It's only that next 5,000 square feet that would be attributable to growth. And that's how we would do a calculation at a simplified level. I mean, there's more nuance to that, but that's simply for that example. We also have to reduce the amounts in excess of your service standards. So I know it sounds a little bit confusing in that point, but we work with city staff, and as part of the calculations under the Development Charge Act, we have to look at what you've historically provided over the last 15 years. And what you've historically provided over the last 15 years is basically our level of service that you can provide into the future. So what you want to provide in the future can be no higher than what you provided in the past. Again, keeping your level of service. So anything above and beyond that, we have to net off of the calculations. And then lastly, DC reserve funds. From one DC bylaw to the other, as you're collecting development charges, there may be some projects that you spend that money right away, but maybe there's some that, it's a larger project that's 5-10 years from now. So you're accumulating funds within a bank account, a reserve fund. So as we're going through your capital program, any surplus money that you have in the bank, that has to be deducted from the calculations because you've already collected it. You can't, double ding. However, the opposite is true too. If you had to draw upon that reserve and you're in a deficit because you had to build something ahead of time and you're paying debt, so you're in a deficit position, that deficit amount you can include in the capital for recovery because you pay yourself back. I paid it through property taxes, but I want to pay that account back because it should really be a development charge recovery. So once we do those deductions, we then have a net cost that we must allocate between residential and non-residential developments. And how we typically do that, we look at maybe your population to employment ratios. It may be an allocation depending on the type of service. Maybe parks and recreation is mostly residential, so maybe that's 95% res. So we do those type of allocations, and then once we separate the two, then we just divide it by your growth forecast, and that gives us your calculated charge. So in simple terms, we take a look at your net capital costs divided by the growth forecast, and that gives us a charge. And for the residential, we typically separate it into singles and semi-detached, multiples, which are your townhomes, and then you have your apartments as well. Maybe 2-bedroom plus or 1-bedroom and bachelor. From a non-residential standpoint, most municipalities, they just have one singular charge. So it's all non-residential square footage. Some may split it between commercial, institutional, or industrial. It's really up to the municipality how they'd like to handle that. In terms of a DC eligible service, you can see here that there's 19 right now that's eligible under the Act. It used to be 20, and it used to be more than this. But here we are today in 2024. It's now been summarized into these 19. And of these 19, you have here 6 services that we are including as part of your background study. So we are including water services, wastewater, services related to a highway, which is really your roads, bridges, public works, facilities, fleet, equipment, fire protection, so your firefighters, library, and parks and recreation. Now, keep in mind that we can also include studies as part of the calculations. Now, this is where I'll talk about it in a later slide, but historically, studies were included for inclusion into the capital program. Then it was removed. Now it's back in. So the province basically did a 2-year hiatus on studies, and then they allowed it to be recovered again under development charges. So what that means is if you have any transportation master plans or fire studies or even the development charge study, all of those can now be included as part of the DC and recovered under the development charges. So as long as it meets one of these services that are on the screen. Again, so just to go over the legislation, again, I won't spend too much time on this. This is really more of a highlight as to what's transpired since your 2019 bylaw. But essentially what we're doing is ensuring that any changes to the legislation is incorporated as part of the background study and your 2024 draft bylaw. So from Bill 108 and Bill 138, what this essentially did was allowed for installment payments. When it comes to site plan and, when it comes to rental housing and institutional developments. So if you ever get a developer or a builder come in with rental housing or institutional development, they're allowed to pay their DCs over 6 installments or over 5 years. And then in terms of the site plan and zoning bylaw applications, whatever date that they provide you with an approved site plan application, their DC rates are frozen for a period of time. Historically, it was over 2 years. Now it's 18 months. So essentially, if someone came today and your rates are, $20,000, let's say, that technically that $20,000 is frozen for the next 18 months. However, Bill 108 allows you also to include interest. So at an annual basis, you can apply interest costs to these. It may not be as high as you indexing or inflating the charge, which you're allowed to do annually, but at least it provides you a little bit of the opportunity cost that you're losing from having to freeze these rates. Bill 197, so that came in 2020. Again, there's just there's a large number of changes, but for your benefit, really, we removed a 10% mandatory deduction that had to be done across a number of services. That list of services that you saw, that's essentially now our new list because of Bill 197. And then municipalities, side by side with the development charges, they're now also allowed to impose what's called a community benefits charge. So if you do have any developments that's greater than 5 stories or 10 residential units, you can actually have another charge under the Planning Act, which reads exactly or almost similar to a development charge, but it's only specific to high-rise developments. And you can capture really anything in there that's growth-related that you can't capture under the development charge bylaws or a parkland dedication. And that's actually a pretty good, good revenue tool, especially now with the municipalities and the province basically reducing the amount of parkland that you can collect because of all those caps. Essentially, right now you have to double, the amounts in order to calculate the cash in lieu or parkland dedication. So a lot of municipalities are leaving a lot of money on the table because the legislation won't allow them to collect for it. But any of that spillover could be calculated or included as part of a CBC. Bill 213, all that does is provide exemptions for universities. So this is not part of the Development Charges Act. However, if you do have any developments on university lands, and those universities receive operating funds from the upper levels of government, then those developments are exempt from DCs. Now, this is something we're monitoring because technically, if there was university lands in Port Colborne, and let's say a Walmart wanted to lease out a portion of that land from the school, well, technically you can't charge the Walmart because it's on university lands. So there is something there, or again, using that as an example, but it is something we're monitoring because it's a pretty powerful portion that, a lot of municipalities can't collect for. And then Bill 109, that just provided for additional reporting requirements for the treasurer. What you may have recalled, at least over the last couple of years, which seems like a blur, but I still remember it as of yesterday, is when Bill 23 came into effect on November 28, 2022. It made a number of changes to about 9 different pieces of legislation, but obviously for today we're talking about the Development Charges Act. It added a number of exemptions and discounts that you now have to adhere to. So for example, again, I'll just go through this briefly, but you now have to provide DC exemptions to any inclusionary zoning, affordable housing units, nonprofit housing is all exempt. Additional residential units. So, for example, if you have a single family home, you can add 2 additional apartments to that single family home and not pay any DCs. So there's those intensification, amounts that you can now include. And then affordable owned and rental units. I'll talk about this in another slide, but essentially if you have any units within the city that are considered affordable, whether they're owned or rentals, you can't charge them a DC. So they are also, free to build and, not pay a development charges. And then attainable units. This is currently not in force. We're still waiting for the bulletin and the regulations from the province to come out. But we have written it into your bylaw, so that way, if it does come out, we don't have to rewrite it again. But it's not in effect until the province says so, and actually determines what those mean. There's also a number of reductions and discounts now. So if you have any purpose-built rental housing, so a building that consists of a minimum of 4 units, all of which are for rental, they get a discount on your development charges. So a one bedroom gets a 15% discount, a 2-bedroom gets a 20% discount, and then a 3-bedroom or higher or larger gets a 25% discount. So that's just off the top of whatever the calculated amounts are. Housing is no longer a DC eligible service. Doesn't affect you, but it did affect the region. They had to amend their bylaw to remove housing as a recovery. And the province did introduce this, but I mentioned earlier, they did remove studies, but then added back in through a later piece of legislation. But they've also identified that land would no longer be eligible. However, I'd like to put an asterisk on that because the province, while they mention land, they haven't prescribed any services. So until they do, all land is still eligible until they say otherwise. Again, I'm not sure when or if they will prescribe any services that would have ineligible land costs. But for now, if you do have any land as part of your capital, we've still put it into the calculations because it's still allowed. There used to be a mandatory phase-in. That's been removed, but historically, you had to, when you passed the bylaw, you had to pass it at 80%. So that's been removed completely. And then the maximum interest rate. Remember how I said they're in those annual installment payments as well as the rate freeze? Well, municipalities now have to adhere to a maximum interest rate, which is typically, which is prescribed as the average prime rate plus 1 percentage point. So if we look at the prior, the prior quarter for interest rates, I believe it was around 7%. So technically, plus 1 percentage point, you could impose 8% per year on interest costs for these development charge payments. And then the last two really are more administrative. You have to allocate 60% of the monies for water, wastewater, and services related to highway at the beginning of the year. Now, 60% allocation does not mean spend. It just means if you collected 100 grand this year, let's say for water, then $60,000 just needs to be earmarked for a project. It could be a project that's 10 years from now, but at least you're saying that I will use this money for that project, down the road. And then the DC bylaw, that's now been extended from 5 years to a 10-year expiry date. And lastly, there's a couple more pieces of legislation. Bill 134 essentially just amended Bill 23, where it introduced income qualifiers as part of that affordable housing. So in Bill 23, it basically said, if it's affordable if the house is less than 80% of the average purchase price. Well, what Bill 134 said, well, no, it's the lesser of average of 90% or 30% of the 60th percentile of income. So now you have to take a look at the income within the municipality to determine whether a unit is affordable. And then Bill 185, this just came out and was passed on July 6th of this year, and essentially provided for the removal of the mandatory rate freeze, the mandatory phase-in. We're allowed to add studies back into the calculations, and that rate freeze, it used to be 2 years, now it's 18 months. So it just the province wants developers to actually, pull a building permit faster than wait the full 2 years and have their rates frozen. If you did have a bylaw that was passed between Bill 23 and June 6, there are some minor amendments that you are allowed to do to reintroduce some of these changes without having to go through a full-blown process and go through an appeal. And modernizing the public meeting notices. So what that means is not just for the DC, but also for the Planning Act. If you don't have a local newspaper, or at least a newspaper that's widely circulated in the clerk's opinion, you can use electronic mediums now to post notices. The acts were very clear; it had to be in a newspaper. So a little bit of 2024 update. The mandatory DC exemptions. So these are ones that you have to provide, regardless of whatever your bylaw says. So you must provide this, when implementing the DCs. Again, I won't go through all of it. Most of it I've already talked about in our earlier slides. But really, like the first three, if you do pass a bylaw, you cannot impose it on the upper tier, nor can the upper tier impose their bylaw to you, as well as the school board. So if the Region of Niagara built a facility in Port Colborne, they don't have to pay the city DC. Likewise, you don't pay a regional DC. And then school boards, they're higher in the pecking order. They're from the province, so therefore they don't pay the municipal development charges. Industrial building expansions. So if an industrial building wanted to expand up to 50% of its current footprint, they don't have to pay a DC. So again, my example would be a 100,000 square foot facility came to your doors, wanted to expand to 150. They don't pay a development charges. However, we do draw the line in the sand that it's a one-time exemption, because you don't want someone coming in with 100 going to 150. Next year, pull out a building permit for 75,000, go from 150 to 225, so on and so forth in perpetuity. So it is a one-time exemption. And then all the other items, I believe, on this list, I have talked about earlier, so I won't go over it again. Now, in addition to those mandatory exemptions, municipalities do have the ability to add any other exemptions they would like, or discounts. Again, this is more of a made in Port Colborne or made in that particular municipality. So you customize your bylaws. You can reduce the calculated DCs in whole or in part, and either for a class or type. So, historically, when we first passed your 2019 bylaw, I remember I was here 5 years ago, there was a reduction in the DCs for a period of, I believe, 2 to 3 years, 2 years, and then we slowly reintroduced it again. So again, you have the ability to reduce it. Maybe perhaps you want to exempt, churches, places of worship, or you want to reduce, for example, the industrial charge, right? So that's all abilities that council can include. You may phase in over time. So if you're going from something small to high, immediate impact, depending on the order of magnitude, maybe you want to phase in that charge, right? So then that way in year 1, maybe it's 50% of that increase. And it's not until year 2 where you implement 100%. So you have that flexibility to do that. And then there's redevelopment credits. So this isn't part of the act, but it is recognized under case law. So if my house burned down, knock on wood, hopefully it doesn't, I should be allowed a period of time to redevelop and rebuild it without having to pay a development charge. So with that respect, it's typically a 5-year time horizon. However, council can elect, whatever time horizon it so chooses. And it works not only from demolitions, but it also works in terms of redevelopment. So if I had that single family home, and I'll use $30,000 as an example for a DC. So I want to tear down that single family home and build 3 townhomes. Well, let's say a townhome costs $20,000. So 3 times the $20,000, that's $60,000 in DCs. However, I had an existing single family home at $30,000, what it would have been paid for. So I then take the 60 minus the 30, so really my net payable is back to 30,000. Because it's recognizing I already had a unit there that was already consuming city services. And it works both ways too, going from residential to non-residential and vice versa. Now, in terms of the city's current exemptions, we've maintained the ones that were included as part of your 2019 bylaw. So we still have any industrial developments that's larger than 5,000 square feet. So if your development is over 5,000 square feet, you don't pay a development charge. Non-residential farm buildings, again, they don't pay a DC. And then you also have a number of community improvement plans. So any policies contained within those CIPs, those exemptions would be basically allocated to those types of developments within those areas. Now, the fact that they're within your CIPs gives you some flexibility to change it, at a much quicker pace than trying to reopen a bylaw. So that gives you some flexibility. In terms of the affordable exemptions, as I said, I'm not going to go through all the gory stuff here, but as I mentioned, to council and the public, the province did include income qualifiers. And what that translates to for the city of Port Colborne, and I'll start off at the top, if a unit is deemed to be affordable in terms of not paying a development charge, then the monthly rent must meet the criteria that's on the screen. So if it's a bachelor or studio apartment, then the rent has to be less than $949 per month. If it's 1 bedroom, it's $1,038. 2 bedrooms are $1,161. And 3 bedrooms plus are $1,440. So if it's less than that amount, then it's considered affordable. You can't charge them a DC. With respect to the owned units, so based on basically ownership, for singles, semis, multiples, and apartments, basically it's $309,000 across the board. So if there's any builders that sell a home for less than $309,000, it's considered affordable. They don't pay a DC. Anything over than that, they pay a development charge. Now, I would also like to note that while someone may come to the municipality and say, well, here's my rent, or here's my bill of sale, and I'm now under this amount, I'm considered affordable, I don't want to pay a DC, and that's fine, you have to extend that. Municipalities shall, underline shall, so you will enter into a 25-year agreement with these builders or homeowners in order to track that it remains affordable over 25 years. So the moment it transfers hands or it changes where it's no longer considered affordable, then there is the recourse for you to then charge back the development charges. Now, the province said that they may prescribe a template for municipalities to use. None was ever prescribed or provided. So we are working with our municipal partners in order to develop an agreement template. And at this time, again, there's a lot of unknowns, whether, who do you charge? Do you charge the developer that first pulled the building permit? Do you charge the current owner, the new owner? There's a lot of, what ifs or unknowns. So hopefully we can flesh that out in the coming months, but that is still something that's in the works. I'll just briefly go over, again, I mentioned about the local service policy, but just as a recap, I mentioned that certain agreements within the subdivision agreements that you provide with developers, you identify what they have to build on your behalf that you eventually, assume once it's built out. So we, as part of the background study, include a appendix that identifies all the different works that needs to be basically laid out as to whether it would be a DC item or a local service. So, like I said, if it's a local road or maybe the water main has to be less than 300 millimeters, then we specify that if this is, the criteria, then it's a local developer responsibility. They need to pay of it out of their own pocket before you assume the subdivision and approve it. If it's anything above and beyond that, then we say that it will be part of the development charge calculations. So that's just the appendix within our background study. So now to get into the specifics of the calculations, as part of the background study, again, we worked with planning staff, we worked with your planning consultants as well, that was undertaking a separate exercise for the city, and we now have a growth forecast that we're utilizing for the background study. And you can see here we have two different time horizons. Well, really it's one, but it's split into two different areas. So they're both over a 12-year forecast, going out to 2036, because that's how it aligns with some of your planning documents. However, we've separated into two categories. One being your citywide, which is the second column, and the other one is urban. And the distinction between the two is that urban are the areas that would have water and wastewater servicing. If it's not within the right-hand side, then it's just wherever in the citywide that would not generate any water or wastewater need. So you can see here, in terms of population, we're looking at basically this almost the same. It's about 3,900 people over the 12-year period. What's really different here is the residential unit increase. You can see there's slightly about 100 units more, just over 100 units more in the citywide at 2,097 residential units and 1,989 units in the urban area that would connect to your water and wastewater system. Now, keep in mind these residential units, these are made up of, single detached, townhomes, and apartments. So it is a blended number. And then from a non-residential forecast, we're looking at roughly 976,000 square feet, which is in the citywide area. And then over this 12-year forecast, about 959,000 square feet of non-residential to be constructed. In terms of your current rates, I'm almost done, just a couple more slides. But essentially, based on your current rates right now, you're currently charging about $11,420 for per single detached, and that includes your water and wastewater rates. If you removed water and wastewater, a single-family home is paying roughly $6,138. And again, this is only for new builds, right? So this is not for any existing homeowners. As we go down the list, you can see depending on the unit type, there's less people that live in it, so the charge is adjusted downward accordingly. So for example, once you get to a townhome, it's about $6,360, and then you have your 2 bedrooms and then the less than 2 bedrooms, basically around that $6,200 and the $3,900 for the small apartments. And then we also have a special care, special dwelling charge. What that is if you have any institutional type residential homes, such as maybe like a long-term care, like a Chartwell or retirement home, we typically charge them on a per bed basis. So you can see there it's about $45.59 per unit, and again that's assuming they have water and wastewater. And then on non-residential, in total, it's $4.10 per square foot. Now keep in mind that these rates, these were what we calculated back in 2019, and they were never indexed. So given your moratorium for 2 years and then, and finally implementing the DCs, there was a period of time where the bylaw was just never indexed. And I'll actually show you where you should be if you were to index these over those 5-year periods. In terms of the calculated rates, based on all of the capital programs and all of the capital projects that were provided to us, this gives us a municipal-wide charge or a city-wide charge of just over $13,200 for a city-wide, a single-family home or single detached. And then adding on the urban services, which is water and wastewater, which is another $17,000, we're now looking at a total charge of $30,529. And you can see the largest component of this, and I'll talk about it in the next page, is wastewater. As I mentioned, going down the table, as you go down to the smaller unit types, the charge and corresponding population or people that reside within them decrease. So you can see a townhome or a multiples at $23,600. We have your 2 bedrooms plus, which is at $21,378, and then your smaller apartments at $14,130. And then that special care, special units charge is $11,700. And our non-residential is $12.05 per square foot. Now, how does this compare with your current charges instead of you flipping back and forth? As you can see here, again, going from $6,138 to $13,263. The largest components of this really are with your parks and recreation, and then as well adding on to your public works, roads, because there's a lot of works that need to be done. And we're also trying to align it with your water and wastewater works for efficiency's sake. In terms of the urban services, you can see the largest component really is that wastewater piece. While water is going up from $3,700 to $5,800, the wastewater is going from basically just under $1,600 up to $11,450. Now, a number of these projects include, again, a large undertaking that's going, under the canal and going through the east side, amongst other things which are documented within the background study. So that is the impetus of the charge. And my footnote here: if your current rates were indexed, to 2024 dollars, they would be roughly just under $17,000. So again, I know you're looking from 11 to 30, but really it'd be more 17 to 30. Not that it paints a better picture, but it's something that just to keep in mind. In terms of the non-residential, you can see here from the municipal-wide side or the city-wide, we're going from $1.59 to $4.15. And then from the water and wastewater, again, that's going from $2.51 to $7.90. So then that $4.10 charge would go up to $12.05. And your current charges right now, if it were indexed, would be at $5.98 per square foot. Now, while these numbers seem, obviously much higher than your current rates, how does this compare with yourselves and other area municipalities? Well, looking at it from the Niagara region municipalities, and I would note that there's quite a number of these municipalities that are also still looking to undertake their background study, so this will change within the next 6 months. But essentially right now, based on your current charges, non-indexed, you're basically just between St. Catharines and Welland, and the calculated amount then gets you just around Pelham's current rates. But, under Lincoln, Niagara Falls, Fort Erie, and then West Lincoln's calculated when they released their study. In order to read this graph, the green sliver that you see at the very bottom, that is the education development charge. So that's what the school boards charge on a per residential basis. The gold is the upper tier, so that's the region of Niagara. And then the blue is the lower tier. So, again, yourselves and your local area municipalities. Keep in mind, the only reason why the Niagara region charge differs for Waynfleet is because Waynfleet does not have water or wastewater. So hence their charge is lower than the other comparator upper tier municipalities. In terms of commercial, so you can see here similarly, you're just in between Welland and St. Catharines. This amount will take you essentially next to what Thorold charges in Rolling Meadows, and then just underneath Niagara Falls. But you still have Pelham, Fort Erie, Welland, and Lincoln higher than you in terms of commercial per square foot basis. And then with respect to the industrial, as you can see here, The blue is where you're currently at right now, and that's what you charge any developments, industrial developments for the non-residential that are less than 5,000 square feet. For those that are less than 5,000 square feet, that calculated amount will take you just above West Lincoln, but under Lincoln, Niagara Falls, Pelham, and Fort Erie. However, keep in mind, you also have a policy where anything over 5,000 square feet does not pay a DC. So hence, that would, again, keep you basically around the Welland Northwest service areas, Welland, and again, yourselves there. But still, a little bit more than than Waynfleet, because again, they don't have water and wastewater. So that concludes my presentation. Again, thank you for going through that with me. As I said, that concludes the public meeting, at least from my presentation piece. I'm happy to provide any answers to any questions that I can respond to tonight. And we are looking to come back to council on October 22nd for your consideration of the bylaw.
Great, thank you for that. That was fantastic. Questions? Councilor Bruno.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for the excellent presentation. It was very helpful and understandable. I do have a couple of questions. Towards the end of your presentation slides, you talked about using population in there, and you had that growth. So, and it's a 12-year range. Is there anything, if the population here spikes, like well beyond those rates, does that have any impact on the future or an ability to revisit?
Great question, through your worship. So that does happen because, again, our forecasts it's exactly that, it's a forecast. So if there are any indicators where you're noticing higher than usual building permits that are, coming in ahead of schedule, this is where, we would urge, the municipality and staff to perhaps even just revisit, some of the numbers to see whether is our forecast still a 12-year or is it really now only an 8-year? So it doesn't change the quantum of the charge because now we're just achieving it faster. However, if it is growing at an exorbitant rate, then maybe perhaps we need to revisit the capital program because are you now building at an appropriate level that was identified in the DC? Or do we now need to revisit what your new target is to 2036 and then add more capital because now you're going above and beyond what was originally planned from the background study? But you can open up the development charge study at any time.
Councilor?
So just on that, municipalities often review their development charges every so many years, or it's recommended. So if that happened, the spike, before one would normally do a review, is what you do or come in and recalculate constitute almost doing a review then? In other words, can the driver of a review be one of those things like population that becomes dramatic? Or is there a rule of thumb as to how often it should be done? And which wins out, so to speak?
Great question, through your worship. So typically, again, this is where you can undertake that review at any point in time. If you feel that, again, the growth forecast or even the capital, for example, maybe the costs are lower now than what you're seeing tender prices, there's always an opportunity to reopen it and update your bylaw. Now, order of magnitude would be, if it's growth related and it's a growth forecast, we would then suggest, well, just redo your study. Because if it's a minor thing where we're still keeping the same growth forecast, but all of your capital has increased because tender prices we thought was increasing at 10% per year is now 50% per year, then we can reassess the capital program while maintaining the same growth forecast. So our denominator is still the same, but the moment you start changing the growth forecast, then you're changing the capital as well. Because now you're saying, well, okay, this capital is only meant to service, again, that 3,000 people or whatever, 3,900. But now if we're going up to 6,000, well, I'm missing capital because if you're saying I'm going to increase the population but not touch the capital program, then your charge just drops. But is that capital program enough to provide you capacity in order to service that doubling of your population, or whatever order of magnitude your population increases by. So it's one of those things where it's up to staff and council whether they feel that is it just an amendment to your existing bylaw, or is it just a full-blown update study? And again, you can undertake that at any point in time, and there's no mandatory minimums that you have to have. So the only thing is you have to revisit the study now every 10 years.
Okay.
But, because after 10 years, your bylaw's expired, unless you do a background study, you can't impose a new one. You can't simply just extend it. But as I said, if you feel that your growth forecast or some of your planning numbers change next year, you can reopen this up and at least change those components, assuming most of the stuff is still relatively, recent and relevant. Then we wouldn't have to do too much on the changes, but we would still have to have that conversation with staff, like the public works, fire chief, etc. Are your capital programs that we've included, is that still sufficient to service this growth? And if not, again, we got to add more capital dollars.
One thing I may not have quite understood well, and maybe helpful for the public, you talked about this 5-year, 80% you start at. So does that mean that the development charges that we're planning to do start at 80% of that rate?
Great question, through your worship. So that was one of the requirements under Bill 23 that's been repealed. So you don't have to do that. So what Bill 23 did back in November 28, 2022 was if you did pass, let's say, this bylaw, basically 6 months ago or 10 months ago, then essentially whatever we calculate, that $30,000, at minimum you can only charge, $24,000, because that's, 80%. And then every year it increases by 5% until you get to year 5 at the full 30, plus indexing, because you're allowed to inflate the charge. But that's been removed. So if you as council pass 30,000 effective the next day or whenever you have your bylaw effective as, it's immediately 30,000.
So for the building community out there, or whether you're building a single family home or you're a developer, so and maybe I need planning department on this. So DC charges are charged at the time of building permit. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So how does that jive with somebody who gets a permit and I guess doesn't build for, so to get under, you come in for a building permit. Now that's completely legitimate. And I don't have any problem with that. But, what if it takes you 3 years to build? Is that a function of a provincial rule on when you can, when a building permit doesn't expire, and can you go back on people who use the window to get a building permit and then don't build for a while?
Great question. Through your worship, my understanding is for most municipalities, they do have a window of time when they pull a building permit in order to act upon that building permit before it becomes stale or expires. So that's where I guess, we would have to have that conversation with staff on what your current policies are in terms of, if a certain, developer, or at least this lot, already paid DCs, and then let's say the DCs now change, 2 years from now or whatever, are you recognizing that DC that was paid 2 years ago? Or are they now paying the DC that's of today, maybe topped up of, the difference between the two? That's something that has transpired on a handful of occasions, but really for the most part, staff have extended the, recognizing that, if it's the same owner, same builder, if they paid, that $11,000 development charge, that they've paid their DCs according to their books, right? Now, having said that, if things have changed, it's been like 5-10 years, it's kind of like, well, your capacity that we assigned to you based on you paying that building permit, that's now been recalculated as part of the engineers doing their master plans. So it's as if you've never even paid that DC, because now we're saying, well, your capacity is no longer locked in for you. It's now back to the pool where everyone has access. So if someone else is building a home, they now have the ability to access your water mains or sewer, etc. So in that case, typically then whatever the prevailing DCs are at that time, unless of course there was an agreement to say we're recognizing that a DC was paid for that property, it would be the prevailing development charges of that day.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Bagia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, you did answer my first question with Councilor Bruno about approvals and not building on them. You did mention that the wastewater rates are high because of our development under the canal. Now, I'm thinking, do we expect somebody who's going to be building a new house on, say, end of Clarence Street to help pay for the water under the canal for the industrial zone? That's why our wastewater rates are proposed to be so high.
Great question. Oh, sorry, Brian?
Maybe just to help the presenter out and council, as council does look at the wastewater project in the coming months to go under the canal, that wastewater line does not just feed the east side industrial land. It will feed and be integral to the east side housing on that side of the city. And we have to think about the fact that the other line that the city has is how old? I don't have the exact date. I required
1965.
1965, and there is no redundancy. So if that line ever had an issue, that whole side of housing would be, I guess, in some complicated scenarios. So I just want to make it clear to council, and I'll let the presenter give the technical answer on how the calculation works, but that line is not just an industrial line.
Okay, thank you, Director. One more question here. I'm good there, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'll leave that one.
Thanks, Councilor. And just to put some context in what Mr. Bowles said, if we didn't have any industrial on the east side, the north end, north of Ramey's Bend, that tunnel's going in. It will feed, or it will actually send fresh water to everything that exists and future for our east side, and it'll take the wastewater from current and future what's at the east side, so all the homes, schools, businesses, everything else. The bonus here with having the industrial come in is the potential to collect the high levels of water usage off industrial, which will, when they come online, will actually help offset water costs within the city. But that project we've been dealing with since 2019 and moving it ahead between Steve's department and myself and Councillor Davies with the region with regards to getting that in. Because our biggest worry is if that pipe collapses, that's 1965, what do you do? Like, there is no east side water plant, and there's no east side sewer plant. So all that stuff, they have to get their water. I can't fathom what we would do. I can't. So this project, and both Fred and I on the political level have really driven the region on this to say, hey, we got to get going on this. We've been lucky to bring in more players to the game as far as just having water and sewer go over there, which is going to help offset some of the costs. But that project has to go ahead, and it, with the quite frankly, with SICA coming in, it's actually sped the region up even faster, which is a good thing. So, but in the future, as Mr. Bowles will come forward at some point with regards to how our water sewer rates will work over for the industrial area, it'll help offset some costs for the normal ratepayer, which is a good thing. Further questions? Okay, Mr. Long, anything to add? So I'm going to go to the public next, if there's anybody from the public.
Nothing from me, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Great, thank you.
Thank you, my pleasure.
So at this time, we don't have any registered delegates, but we do have some people in the crowd tonight. So is there anybody that wishes to ask questions that is here from the public? Seeing none. Okay. Great.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Members of Council, staff.
So with regards to development charges, background study, and bylaw 2024-171, if I could have Councillors Bagu and Bruno move that the Chief Administrative Officer Report 2024-171 be received, and that the City of Port Colborne development charges, background study, and bylaw prepared by Watson Associates be received and that it comes forward to council on October the 22nd, 2024 for final approval. Questions on that? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Oh, so at this time, council, we urge the public to submit their comments in writing prior to September 27th, 2024 to cityclerk@portcolborne.ca. Council consideration of the development charges bylaw is scheduled to occur on October the 22nd, 2024. The public meeting is now closed, and we'll be moving on to our regular meeting. Thank you. Next is the mayor's report. So Premier Ford was in Port Colborne again today for the second time since May to take part in an event marking a huge investment in our province and a major expansion within our city. He was here with Ontario Minister of Economic Development Vic Fedeli and Niagara West MPP Sam Oosterhoff, who's Associate Minister of Energy. And they took part, as well as Councillor Davies was there and Chair Brad. They were taking part in the groundbreaking for the massive new development at Young Bunzlauer. Young Bunzlauer Chief Executive Officer Bruno Tremblay was here from Switzerland to lead the groundbreaking ceremony of a new production facility where the company will produce xanthan gum. And I do remember the Young Bunzlauer groundbreaking back almost 25 years ago, and we learned about citric acid, an ingredient used in thousands of foods, cosmetics, and cleaning products. Who knew almost everything citric acid is in? And I said today, Red Bull uses Port Colborne citric acid, and that went through a worldwide taste test. So I did say publicly today, it has gained some traction. Port Colborne gives you wings, not Red Bull. But you think about it, something like Red Bull, you see on race cars and in hockey arenas and football stadiums and baseball parks. Port Colborne is all a part of that. I think that's really cool for our city that we're on such a product like that. But believe me, between xanthan gum, which is going to go out to over 130 countries, they go to 137 countries now just with their citric acid. And xanthan gum, for those that don't know, is a thickening agent used in thousands of products, including foods and medicines. And it's also a vegan alternative to gelatin, for those that are vegans. Tomorrow we'll raise the flag in the morning for Franco-Ontario Day. Members of the French Golden Age Club will gather outside at City Hall at 9:15 Wednesday morning to sing our national anthem en français. And Edith Tosher will recite a poem about pride in Francophone culture. Franco-Ontario Day is a way for us to acknowledge more than 400 years of Franco-Ontarians contributing to the culture, social, and economic fabric of our province. Members of Port Colborne's French community are among 750,000 Franco-Ontarians and 1.5 million Ontarians who parlez-vous français. So merci beaucoup and tout le monde. We hope to see many of you tomorrow at the Assai Casse open house in the Golden Puck Room at the Valley Health and Wellness Center. The AK open house begins at 2 p.m. and runs until 7 p.m. It's a drop-in style community open house where we'll see drawings of what the new plant will look like. We'll learn about the products to be made there. And yes, there will be people there to discuss job opportunities, current and future. And we're looking forward to the Assai Casse open house tomorrow, Wednesday, September the 25th, from 2 to 7 p.m., Valley Health and Wellness Center. Please join City Council and staff to acknowledge Canada's National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, which takes place Monday, September the 30th. National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is also known as Orange Shirt Day. It is a day to honor the children who never returned home and the survivors of residential schools, as well as their families and communities. An important aspect of truth and reconciliation work is committing to your own awareness and self-education, the tragic and painful history and ongoing impacts of residential schools. One of the city's best-loved family events is next Thursday, October the 3rd, our popular open house featuring the Touch a Truck and fire safety activities. And that'll run from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock at Public Works and the fire station on Clowley Street. The open house provides a super fun opportunity to get up close and personal with city equipment, meet the operators, and safely explore vehicles usually only seen from a distance. We'll all learn lots of about fire safety as well, and there will be refreshments and giveaways. So we look forward to seeing you next Thursday, October 3rd, at the Fire Hall and the Operations Center from 4 to 7 p.m. Don't be pushing any kids out of the way this year, Councillor Bagu, to get on top of the big grader. Yeah. Council and I are pleased to, the other thing is we're going to be doing the snowplow competition with the schools that have painted the snowplows again. So we'll be doing that again. That'll be done October 3rd. Council and I are pleased to welcome back Charlotte Madden. Charlotte. Our former deputy clerk, who became our city clerk a year ago. She's been away raising a new family member. Congratulations. And now she's returned. And it's good to have you back. We pretty much missed you, We did. You've been around for so long. In Charlotte's absence, though, we were honored to have Carol Schofield take the helm as acting clerk for the past 6 months. Many people may not be aware the city clerk is responsible for all legislative and council services, licensing, vital statistics, records management, access to information. The clerk is expected to advise and assist council on the formation of policies and proclamations. The clerk is the keeper of procedure and protocol. She provides, or he, I suppose, but at this time it's a she, support to council by preparing agendas for council meetings, oversees local elections, and ensures compliance with provincial and federal regulations. It's a huge job few can do with such finesse. Carol had a few years' experience as a municipal clerk. I'd say a few decades, but you never know she was that old because she's been doing it for so long, and phenomenal. We're so grateful for Carol's professionalism these past 6 months. We are thankful for her patience, her knowledge, her insight, and her strength. She's been the calm in the storm, the light at the end of the tunnel, and the wind beneath our wings, because Port Colborne gives you wings. On behalf of council, we thank her for her service these past 6 months. She hit the ground running when she started and has not stopped. And hopefully she's watching right now. She'll be with us a little longer, but we wanted to say, as her time with us in Port Colborne comes to an end, thank you. Thank you so much for everything, Carol. We really appreciate it. Are there any questions with regards to the mayor's report? Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. I wasn't able to make it this morning, and I don't know at the JBL groundbreaking. Did they reveal, I mean, we had that with Asekashai, did they reveal the employment increase at all?
Yes. So the construction is around 300 jobs. Once this phase 1 is fully operational, it'll be 50 jobs. Once phase 3 is completed, I think the number they said was around 300, but I don't think it's that high. I think somebody confused that with the construction jobs, but it will be quite a bit higher. That's 150 jobs if you go 50, 50, 50, but I believe it'll be a little higher than that, because I'm sure they're going to be hiring more maintenance people, things like that. But these are very high-skilled, high-paying jobs for this company. It's a very automated system that they'll be using for it. One thing that they did say today, Councillor, was the fact that the reason why they picked Port Colborne, because that was asked by CHCH, and I said, why not? But it's because of the farming we have within the Niagara region and Ontario that we are one of the largest producers of corn in Canada, and they only use Canadian corn. So just to take it a little further, so, yeah.
Just one other, and perhaps not for tonight, and this may involve Director Bowles, but like with Sekasai, their CIP, industrial, 10 years, we all know that, we all know what the taxes will be. This Young Bunzlauer expansion, I'm sure some of that 200 million is equipment and things like that. But do we have any idea, or could we get an idea in the future, whether by email or here, as to what that might generate in new taxes for Port Colborne?
Yeah, we can get Mr. Long and Mr. Bowles to look after that and get back to us within a week or so. Is that a week or so fine, Councillor? Is that fine? Okay. All right. Further questions? Thank you. Next, we have Councillor Davies. Anything to add, Councillor?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, thank you, Council, for the honor that you did our team tonight. I know it's not in this wheelhouse as a regional councillor, but I just want to express our appreciation. It's been a few months in the making, and having this team recognized by this council is very special to all of us. You could tell Doug Brown was getting a little choked up in his presentation. It's an emotional time for everybody. And we're going to miss 3 of the players that are no longer with us. But anyway, let's move on to the regional report. I don't have a whole lot for you tonight. I wanted to hear some questions or comments from you as we go through the budget process now. It's a particularly challenging year. We're spending a lot of time on water and wastewater, as you are as well. We are experiencing a lot of financial pressures that seem to be coming every year. And keeping in mind that I've only been a regional councillor now for a couple of years, it's been a bit of a learning curve for me to dig into some of the processes of how we build the budget. And I have a lot of concerns about how some decisions are made, but as we get through them this year, I'm hoping that the overall tax rate that we are going to recommend as an increase to Niagara can come down substantially from the original that was projected. In fact, I think it will come down substantially. This council, this regional council is particularly engaged this year in the budget discussions. So as these tough decisions are made, I would just want to assure you that we've got our eye on the ball as well, and I really do want to see some input from council here. I was happy to be with the mayor today and the premier and Mr. Fideli for the groundbreaking at JBL. I was listening to Minister Fideli on the way here today, and he was singing the praises of the city of Port Colborne. And he was asked the question, why is Port Colborne now the darling of industrial development in Ontario? And he paid tribute to the engagement of the council and the mayor, the region, and the people, but made reference to the quality of life in this community, and that industrial expansion is often, as a prerequisite for expansion, is often based on how an analysis is done of the standard of living in a community. So while I have said many times that our mission over the past 30 years is to prove that there's life south of Highway 20, I can assure you that now people know about what's going on south of 20, and it's going to be, this is, I think, just the beginning of many bigger things that are going to happen in the city of Port Colborne, and I'm just so proud to be with all of you as we go through that journey and attract new investment to our community. On the flip side of that, just one of the concerns and an issue that has come to my attention more in the last little while than I have seen in the last couple of years is the problem of homelessness and addictions that are plaguing every community in Niagara. Now, I know that we don't have an overwhelming number of homeless people in Port Colborne, but the problem is getting bigger, but the solutions are becoming fewer. And I think it's time that we engage this level as well as other levels of government in a comprehensive analysis of what needs to happen to solve some of these problems. Now, the good news is the city of Welland has just committed to building a shelter on Ontario Road, which will also service Port Colborne. I think there's 50 units in this facility, which we're hoping that will be online before the snow flies. So that will have a positive impact on the situation that we have here in Port Colborne. So I'm looking forward to that being completed. The pressures that we're feeling as a result of the growth, Niagara is actually getting about 1,200 extra residents per month now. So we are growing substantially. 1,200 may not seem a lot, but well, actually it is a lot when you think of 1,200 people coming into Niagara every month. So the pressures on housing continue to grow, and as the city grapples with DCs and policy on that, we're looking for some long-term solutions to increase our housing stock. Our unemployment rate for the first time is about on par with the province, which normally Niagara has had a higher unemployment rate than the province. Now we're pretty much on par, which shows that we are creating jobs in Niagara. The biggest problem moving forward, I think, is going to be the labor pool as we expand our industrial base. It's a double-edged sword. We have to draw on a labor pool that may not necessarily have the same skills that are needed in these new developments, but it's going to also mean a net increase in people moving to our community. So with that, I want to say I'm here to hear some of the issues that you would like me to bring back to the region on your behalf, and I welcome your questions.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Any questions with regards to the region? Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Fred, thank you very much for your offer of having us included in that. I know you and I across the dais have had some discussions back when perhaps amalgamation was more on the forefront. And I think like any of us, and I've always thought this of you, that over time you learn from all your life experiences. And I guess I've always had concerns at the regional level, although I have some empathy for the fact that they have to mandate certain programs, social service, or things that you can't, if there's 1,000 more people drawing social services, you have to pay the bill. And there's no movement in that. Things like the size of policing and all those things. I get that. But I'm hoping that now perhaps your assessment of the region vis-a-vis, I think, some decisions they've made, the homes for the aged going all self-funded as opposed to the private sector, their issues surrounding debt and the pressures on their credit rating. And I'm hoping that that's sort of rounded your view, but I guess you're very, concerned about what's been the north-south divide at Highway 20. And I'm just hoping that time and what you've seen and your own business acumen, that, I don't think bigger has proved to be better and maybe not even more efficient. And the offset by where some of that is true is I hope what you see in Port Colborne with AK and JBL and the future down here, that the ability to be nimble and small does let you be more nimble and move better. So I guess I'm hoping that sort of maybe coming together on this whole potential amalgamation issues, because I think for Port Colborne's best years are ahead of it. But I also think that there are going to be best years because there is a Port Colborne and there is that nimbility, that's such a word, and the people around this table and the type of community that you saw. And I wouldn't want to see that lost, and I hope maybe we could all row more in the same direction. I see advancements there at the region where everybody sees that what's good for Port Colborne is good for the region, and vice versa. We saw that when Welland got its GE plant there, and I think we're seeing it now with the region has come through for us. But I just hope that this time around, and with a lot of you that came on the last term in the 2 years, that much more focus will be spent on innovative ways and financial. When you're a small community, you have to be creative, and when you're a large community, sometimes you don't have to be creative. And the fact that, they can benefit from, a dip in one area, but, they have the benefit of getting all the region's assessment. So I guess without further going on that, I really appreciate your openness to invite us into that conversation. And I hope we can all, what we've seen in the last little while is makes it better for all of us as politicians and as citizens. So thank you for opening that door.
Thank you, Councillor. And just to follow up on one of the comments you made, I think one of the things that is becoming evident, and the mayor and I have spoken about this, as we yeah, I don't know whether the amalgamation question is going to go anywhere. I don't suspect it will before the end of this provincial term. But there are creative ways that we can utilize to restructure the way we finance assets, taking certain assets off the books. When we are investing in seniors' homes, I think we need to explore more creative ways of financing those projects so that it doesn't adversely affect either our credit rating or our access to debenture capital if and when we need it. Just to follow up on the mayor's comments, like, for example, the existing infrastructure that goes under the canal, it's old. It's slightly younger than me. But if that goes, you've got a Calgary on your hands, but worse. And so the AK development is one of the best, I think it's what moved the needle to the point where we're going to get that investment from the region and the province. So I'm hoping that as we have these discussions about the long-term growth and the capital assets that we have in Port Colborne, that it also includes discussions with the province and the federal government. Because you remember the days when infrastructure was generally shared a third. Some of those continue to happen, but they don't happen on the regular basis that we could count on them like we did in the past. And I think that's where we need to be going in the community to start advocating for some of these larger projects that, out of sight, out of mind, well, it's no longer. We have to actually deal with those capital issues.
Great, thanks. CAO, Lou?
Through your worship to council, just want to thank Councillor Davies for bringing forward this information, the earlier information, not the amalgamation information, but about the mental health, addiction, and homelessness troubles that impact many municipalities in Niagara. By way of an update, I can say that, and it's complicated because we operate in a two-tier system where the Municipal Act sort of sets out responsibilities for each order of government. Ours is mainly roads, bridges, parks, and so on, things you can touch, things that we maintain to keep our community moving, where social services are at a different order of government. But a few years ago, under the leadership of Joanne Ferraccioli, the city established a social determinants of health committee that's internal to the city. And it talks about the social determinants of health, which are apart from the healthcare determinants of health. It includes your economic status, your geography, where you live, education, and so on. And that committee meets here at City Hall. It includes city staff, NRP, community services from the region, Bridges, Community Health Center, and other agencies. There's a resident also on that committee, and the mayor and a council member, Hoyle, attend those meetings. And at the last meeting, which I was unable to attend, we had a little bit of a discussion about the Niagara Regional Poverty Reduction Strategy, which you'll know about from Regional Council and the mayor will know about. They've been presenting their strategy at a number of different areas, including the Community Safety Wellbeing Advisory Committee, which two of my CAO colleagues sit on behalf of the 12 local area municipality CIOs. And there's a CIO on the steering committee for the poverty reduction strategy. All this to say, I have arranged for the poverty reduction strategy staff to come to City Council on October 22nd. So although this is not homelessness exactly, this is homeless adjacent, and I think it is one pillar in working towards solutions that help people who battle addictions, mental health issues, and also housing shortages or lack of housing. So you'll see those folks here on October 22nd, and I think that will go a little way to addressing some of the things that Councillor Davies brought forward.
Great, thanks, Scott. Okay, any further questions? Great, thanks again, Fred. So council, just only because there is a change in how our agenda works now, it's quite frankly, it's what Fred and I deal with at the region and a number of other municipalities use. So under the consent agenda, there's a whole myriad of reports, minutes, things like that. So we're going to move them in group. Most of them you don't bring out normally anyways. However, if there's an item under any of those, you just let me know, you put your hand up, you say I'd like, and I'll use the example of approval of minutes, item 12.1C, special council meeting. You could say, I have a question or a statement where, you know, it shows that I wasn't there, but I was there if it was a typo. Things like that, or you actually have a question for the minutes of the museum, or under the staff reports, you have a question. So instead of just letting the staff know which ones you want to pull, what we do is we just take questions, but we still vote on it in block. So that's how we're going to do it moving forward. So before I get to questions, the item that has been moved out of that, because we do need to deal with it specifically, is the item with regards to the vacant land amendments, because of two of us that have a conflict with that. So that'll be drawn out, and we'll deal with that specifically later, and we'll have Councillor Bodner look after that one. So with regards to items that run all through item 12 before item 13, are there any questions on any of those items? Councillor Baggio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I have a question on 12.4B, integrity report, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I can ask my question now?
Yep, questions or comments?
Only because of the one write-up that was sent by the clerk. It said you may ask a question on an item. I took it as one question.
Oh, no, you can ask questions, yeah.
Then I'm cut off, I can't ask for amendment or nothing.
See, the region you would be,
So
but
that's
here
why
we're more open.
That's why I'm back to the old way, I just asked to lift it.
Yeah, no.
But, okay, thank you. Yeah. This page. The, which one? Yeah, we're on 12.3. Okay. The deficit's gonna be $119,100, according to the report. I guess for Director Bowles, is this for the whole 2024, the whole year? What I'm getting at is, are you expecting everybody else to make up for the $119,100, or that's just going to be lost if approved?
Mr. Bowles?
Through the mayor to the councillor, with respect to the wastewater report and how that rolls out for, is this like, sorry, Mayor, can I just double check? Like,
Actually, I'm on the wrong
one.
Okay.
I'm supposed to talk integrity.
Integrity Commissioner, yes.
That's different, eh?
You're throwing me off.
I was wondering what you were asking. I was looking for that
Good.
number.
I'm glad I threw you off for once about your life. I guess it's for the CAO. The integrity report mentions a couple of suggestions, and there's nothing in this report that staff are going to implement those suggestions. And I'm just wondering why there should be a separate report. Like he's asking that we have if the report approved, we're going to implement the recommendations regarding in-camera education seminar with the IC regarding Bill 68, Conflict of Interest Act, and B, education seminar with counselors regarding requests for advice and subsequent complaints are not dealt with in a vacuum. So he's making those two suggestions, but if we just pass this report, we're not doing anything with his suggestions.
No. So you got to remember, this is correspondence from the Integrity Commissioner to us. We don't change this. Staff doesn't, this is his letter to us. So we as a council can direct staff to do that. But I believe the clerk has that information, that actually the clerk's department will move forward with those recommendations from the Integrity Commissioner. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
So I think I just didn't know what we're doing with his recommendations.
Yeah, so now that so tonight we'll receive it, because that's what we'll do with most correspondence unless we want to do something else with it. But staff have already read this, and they've already indicated that they are going to be speaking with the Integrity Commissioner and bring him forward to a future meeting for education purposes.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I'm good with it. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, you want to jump in there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, exactly how Mr. Mayor just explained it. We have just, we're bringing this forward to council. It's for the public to review as well. It will be posted on the city's website as well, the Integrity Commissioner report as we're seeing it tonight. But yes, absolutely, we're making plans to move forward with the suggestions as he's laid out in this letter, and they will be forthcoming either later this year or early in 2025.
Okay?
Yeah, I'm good, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions on any of the consent items? Remembering the 12.3A has been removed because we'll deal with that separately. Further questions? If I could have Councillors Elliott and Hoyle move these in block. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Council. Okay, so now on to the items requiring separate discussion. Item 13.1 is the new official plan engagement and work plan for 2024-172. That is Denise. So if you want to come forward. And we are going to have a presentation on this evening. Okay. Do you want to introduce your consultant, please?
Good afternoon, Council. This evening we have Nicole with Dillon Consulting, who will be presenting on the vision and objectives and the proposed work plan for the next phases of the official plan.
Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you, Denise, Your Worship and Council. My name is Nicole Bugley. I work with Dillon Consulting. I was here in June to give a presentation on what we heard through the engagement session for the new official plan. I'm here to present our proposed engagement strategy and work plan for the official plan that staff will then take and implement. If you have any questions throughout, just let me know. I'm happy to pause and take questions. I will just give, because I was here a few months ago, a quick recap of what I presented then before I get to the work plan section. So I just talked about that. Just a quick reminder, the official plan is really a tool that the municipality can use to anticipate and plan for future growth. It's a guiding document that contains a vision and policies that will guide growth on how to really build a complete community. So it looks at everything from housing to jobs to parks. And it takes into account other existing strategies and plans that the municipality is working on. So the current official plan was approved in 2013, and so a new plan is needed to respond to existing conditions in the municipality and to plan for growth to 2051. So we initiated public engagement in the preparation of the creation of the official plan, and that is set out in the Planning Act. And like I said, the engagement will inform the vision and the scope of work for the new official plan. This is a reminder of what we did to complete the engagement process. So we launched an engagement page on Let's Talk Port Colborne. We met with a technical advisory team, and this fulfills Section 26(3)A requirements of the Planning Act. We conducted an online survey and mapping survey to gather input on key directions. We hosted an open house. We created an engagement summary. We held our statutory meeting. We created the work plan that I'll present today, and then we're here at the last step, which is to finalize the directions that staff will use as input into their creation of their official plan. And all of that is in our report that we submitted, that's Denise submitted as well with her staff report today. So a quick recap of the numbers. So we had 14 participants that sat on our technical team meeting, and that included staff from Port Colborne, Niagara Region, and the NPCA. We had over 600 visits to the official plan page, with 35 submitted surveys and 151 comments on the map, and then We lost count at around 60 visitors to our open house because it was actually quite busy. So that was our engagement. We heard a wide range of views on the official plan. So we heard overall there's a desire for Port Colborne to continue to be a welcoming and inclusive community, that a wide range of diverse housing is needed across the municipality, specifically affordable housing. People really value the environment in Port Colborne, and they want to see continued preservation of the environment and extending that conservation where possible. That the agricultural landscape is also treasured, and there's an opportunity to diversify some of the agricultural uses. People also value the industry and employment and want to see considerations for mitigation on residential uses where possible. For retail and commercial, we heard that people really want to see walkable, compact communities, or communities where you can access your retail and commercial needs close to where you live. For future engagement, people were really interested in hearing about a number of topics that are presented here, and really being involved in an open and transparent process. We also heard that online engagement and in person, a mix of both, is important for residents to engage in future engagements on the official plan. So what we did was we took all of the feedback that we heard and came up with a number of recommended key directions for the official plan. So this is something staff can take away and start to direct their policies towards for the official plan. So this includes promote and support a broad range of housing options, including affordable housing, enhance and expand our green spaces and parks, growth management by planning for amenities, community facilities, infrastructure, and utilities, promote economic growth, tourism, commercial and industrial areas, preserve and enhance community design, preserve agricultural land, and protect the environment, including source water and planning for climate change. And so we further distilled those topics into recommended areas of focus for future engagement. So these are the things that people are most interested in hearing about. Certainly not limited to these, but the key focus that will inform some of the future engagement. So this includes housing and population growth, urban design and placemaking, environment and natural heritage, jobs in the economy, and sustainability, climate resilience, adaptation, and mitigation. So you can see those key themes that emerged quite strong across all of those topics. So what we also did was come up with a recommended approach for engagement on the official plan creation itself. And so based on the engagement conducted previously, we're recommending quite, I think, a robust and comprehensive engagement program for the municipality that aims to capture the diverse voices across the community. And generally, official plans are quite regulated by the province, and so engagement is where you can really tailor your official plan to create like a made in Port Colborne approach to how you're growing in your community. And so Indigenous engagement and relationship building is an important component of that as it relates to land use matters. And so what we recommend is that the city reach out to First Nations communities, rights holders, and local Indigenous and First Nations groups at the start and develop a relationship building approach. So that generally starts with understanding how those communities would like to be engaged throughout the process, and then tailoring an engagement program specific to each community that recognizes their consultation protocols. We recommend continuing the technical advisory team meetings so that you can work your policies through the other agencies and partners involved. So you could continue the group that we formed or add to it if you'd like. We recommend a number of policy brochures and background papers that are public facing. So normally those documents are quite internal to inform staff in updating the policies, but it's a good chance to educate the community about the inner workings of an official plan and help them understand planning and sort of bring them into that process. So there's an opportunity to make those public facing. Port Colborne has a great online engagement page, so you could continue to use that. We did see quite a lot of visitors there, so it shows that it's well used. Because the community was so interested in getting involved in this project, we recommend forming a community liaison committee, and we've done this in other municipalities and have had good success. And what you do is you create a working group of people who are wanting to get into the nitty-gritty of an official plan creation to act as a sounding board throughout the engagement process. And then through that, you often create community champions who work to talk to their neighbors, their friends and family, and encourage them to participate in the process. So it gives you a chance to dive deeper with members of the public. And then there's some stakeholder workshops as well, where you would dive deeper with people that have specific lenses, like the development community, who you'd want to engage throughout the process. And then you have your public open houses as well. There's a chance to do further online engagements, so not just through surveys, but you can do virtual meetings, some interactive components through your website, like forums, stuff like that. Or you could also do pop-ups. So if you have a farmer's market or a community event, staff could go there and talk to people, sort of meeting them where they're at and not just asking the community to come to you. So we've included that in our work plan as well. And then there would be council workshops and briefing sessions along the way, the statutory public meetings that are required, and then reporting on what was heard throughout the process. And so the actual creation of the official plan would take place across 4 phases. The first phase being a launch, where you would write those 4 backgrounder and policy direction reports. And so those would be on the topics that I mentioned earlier, so housing and population, urban design and placemaking, jobs in the economy, and the environment, natural heritage, sustainability, and climate resilience. And so what those papers do is they look at the current policies the official plan has, what some of the gaps are, anticipating future needs, and then folding in any updates that the province has made since you last updated your official plan. And then the goal is that those would be taken out to engagement, and the municipality would lead the Indigenous engagement, launch the engagement page, and then the team would start to come up with some preliminary policy directions based on what you're hearing throughout that engagement process. In the second phase, you do a policy directions memo, so that would go to council to inform on the direction that the policies are headed, and then that would get taken out to further public and Indigenous engagement, and then end with a council presentation. In phase 3, that's where you start to draft your official plan policies, and then that gets worked through the engagement channels. It's really a chance to further refine those policies before it gets finalized. And then the final phase is the finalization of the official plan. That goes out for engagement, including statutory engagement, and then it's sent to the approval authorities. So the next steps in this process is to create a finalized terms of reference to support the preparation of the new official plan, and that would be in staff's hands. All right. Any questions?
Great. Thank you, Nicole. Questions on my left here? Anybody got a question? No? Councillor Bruno.
I'm not sure if this would actually go to Nicole, and maybe Denise. Should I ask it now? Combine it all in one, or not?
Yeah.
Okay. So, we've all been faced here with 7,000 units of housing stock coming into the city of Port Colborne, all of which is currently under the official plan, although some haven't had their public meetings. So I think this is probably going to be more of a question to Denise. So if you look at, in my mind, if you look at those 7,000 units, this next official plan may only cover the remaining 20% or so of the city before it fills up. So you could, that's going to be, maybe the end point unless you expand the urban boundary. So my biggest concern for the next official plan, and I'm going to sort of ask this together because maybe there's something we could do under the current official plan. So I wrote down that my 3 things that are most important are design standards, and design standards. Because I've seen, and I don't know about the rest of council, but I've seen too many areas in Niagara with rapid growth that I sort of call vinyl siding ghettos. And I don't want that for Port Colborne, and I'm sure all of us don't. And so I'm wondering through you, Mr. Mayor, to Denise, or if Nicole wants to add this, is there something we can do about design standards within the confines of a official plan?
Denise?
Through the mayor to the councillor, the intent is that the official plan will have urban design guidelines for the 2 applications, the significant applications that we have in the planning department right now for review. So we have the elite secondary plan as well as the Mapleview subdivision. Those 2 files are approximately 4,200 units. I did take a look, and the elite secondary plan does propose urban design guidelines, and they do speak to some of those elements that you have mentioned. There is an opportunity through our subdivision agreement to require developers to implement architectural control guidelines. And those guidelines will get down to the very details of the building and the different materials that the buildings are made out of and the facades of the buildings. So there is that opportunity, especially for applications that are not draft plan approved. And with the elite, that is one that they have proposed urban design guidelines, and it's something that staff can look at enforcing even the more detailed architectural control guidelines. In terms of the new OP, we can include urban design guidelines, and we will include that within that document. There is also an opportunity to put some policy directions within the OP that speak to perhaps specific areas of the city where we really want to focus on urban design elements. So we could, for instance, suggest that the downtown, that additional study take place and the city look at developing urban design guidelines for that area, or perhaps another large greenfield area that we have. So there is kind of 2 components to that in terms of the applications that we have now, and then future applications. We can ensure that there's those policies in our official plan to support implementing urban design guidelines and architectural guidelines.
Councillor?
Thank you. Here's where I really thank you for that. That really helps me a lot to understand this. But where I would like council support on or direction in this is I'm concerned that those 2 largest ones and the other ones that are in the pipeline, that we don't have the design standards and we don't understand how thorough they can be. And I assume that that's going to take person power and it's going to take money. And so I don't know if that needs to transcend into this upcoming budget. And I'm not sure that the scope of work that I'm seeing here puts maybe enough emphasis, and I don't think there's any dollars there for that. And I just really feel passionate about the fact that we have a chance to ensure that, housing stock isn't built where, you can't separate one door from another on a street. That, one should be this type of brick and next door that mix. And I'm not so sure that you can just leave it to marketing and the developer when price is now a key issue in housing. And you know, just there's not a community I've been into in Niagara where I haven't seen some of these subdivisions and developments go wrong. Thankfully, they're not every one. But if there's something we can do about it, I'd like to put some person power and some dollars to it. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Denise. So let's deal separately with the current ones, either draft plan approved or potentially going to be draft plan approved. So that can be done, as you talked about, in subdivision agreements. So would the idea of ramping forward design standards that are suitable to this council, but more suitable to this community, could that be undertaken in relatively quick fashion? Perhaps you can speculate on dollars, but then it's used for the subdivision agreements that will come, and it also dovetails into policies and procedures in their next phase. So we're spending money once, we're spending it now, we're spending it quickly to take care of what might be a problem in the 7,000 and what could be a problem in the next 5,000. So that's a lot to load on you in a question, but I'm concerned about budget. I'm just really concerned about getting this done because I think a lot of communities in Niagara are losing some of their character. And to the extent we can do something about it, let's do it. So I don't know if you could comment on cost, timing, ability to broach the current and the future.
Through the mayor to the councillor, in terms of the elite secondary plan, I think this is a great opportunity to have that conversation, and staff can have that conversation with the developer and their consultant to kind of instill the importance of the urban design guidelines and architectural control guidelines with the developer. On that file, we are having an open house in about 2 weeks' time, where we will receive feedback from council and members of the public on sort of the initial plans that they have for that application. So I think that would be a great opportunity on that specific file to make it known that council is definitely interested in the design guidelines for that area. They have proposed design guidelines, but we can of course look at those in more specific detail.
So if I could, Mr. Mayor, is that to relate it to the official plan, which is a topic. So is that, though, something whereby we're going to look at how one developer is going to do it and amend that and adopt it ourselves or into Nicole's next step? Or do we have to drive the car and say, these are design parameters that elite or others you need to adopt? Like, I'm a little bit worried. I like borrowing on good ideas that we don't essentially have to pay for, but I'm also concerned that I don't want the tail wagging the dog and that I think we should be in the driver's seat on that. So I don't know your comments on that.
So just before you go, Denise, Madam Deputy Clerk, can you bring up the slide that shows, I think there's 4 categories of how we're moving forward? The phases or the... No, go back to that right there. So where you're going through there, we have engagements, council presentations. We have a lot of stuff within that, Councillor, that not only we as a council and our staff can work on, but public engagement and developer engagement and all that. That's actually going to take place within that. Is that correct, Nicole?
Yes, through your worship, that is correct. And there is an opportunity to develop enabling policies in your official plan to direct the creation of design guidelines. We have seen other municipalities develop design guidelines in tandem with their official plan. And it makes it easy because you can tack it onto the engagement process. So you can go out and engage on the design guidelines while you're talking about the official plan. And we certainly heard comments from your community about elements that would be included in the design guidelines versus the OP. Denise can speak to that a bit further, like what gets included in the OP versus the design guidelines. But the creation of this process of your official plan will take about a year. So I'd let Denise talk about how that impacts the current applications you're seeing. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for bringing that up. I guess what I'm concerned about is if we can go down this road of doing something about it now independently, but it can get thrown back into that, then we're not waiting the year, because my biggest problem is 4,200 of the 7,000 could be done and dusted by a year.
No, and I understand that, but I mean, we have to deal with what we have to deal with this. And as both Denise and Nicole have stated, that, you know, these things can work in tandem. So then I'm going to go back to Denise on this. So Denise, with regards to what's on the table now with regards to subdivision plans, what teeth do we have to make sure we want to see design within those subdivisions before any new ones? Because we can deal with the new ones as they come along with this, but where are our teeth in what we've got today?
For sure. So through the mayor to all of council, the teeth we have would be with the applications that we have right now in our shop for review. So that would be, we have smaller applications, but the two primary applications are going to be the secondary plan for Elite, which that is a significant process. It's in a mini official plan. So they have drafted urban design guidelines. So we have the opportunity to really jump into those and jump into those with council and the community to determine if those are appropriate. I did go through them. They are a little bit high level, so I think there is more of an opportunity to make them more specific. But we definitely have an opportunity through Elite, and I would say we still have an opportunity with Mapleview, with that application, that subdivision that's about 2,000 units, to work with them on urban design guidelines. So we've got about 4,200 units that we're still able to have conversations with the developers, and honestly to get them to do the work, give them direction and have them pay for the work and do the work, and have staff review and bring it to council for the feedback. That would be my suggestion on those two significant files.
Councillor?
So I guess the question is really how much do you wait for them and how much are we proactive? I mean, other than the money, and I have no idea what that money is, I just think it's money well spent against 4,200 in a pipeline, and this to be, I guess, as you said, their Elite's plans right now are at a high level. And if even the smaller developments that are under the 4,200, like in the other 3,800, there may be some benefit to having this now. Like, I think that if you don't do it now, you run I think you have the great opportunity, I should say it in the positive, the great opportunity now to do that. Like, it's pretty hard for me to believe that members of the public aren't going to want to see design guidelines and make their neighborhoods better. And if we're going to do it, you know, do we do it in the tender document that comes for the next phase? Or do we just do it now and eliminate it from the tender document? We've already paid for it. I mean, we'll gather information from Elite, but it seems to me if we were going to do it there, it's an add-on. And if we do it now, it's not an add-on. So it's, to me, the money part, I don't think is that significant. So I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Through the mayor to the councillor, if we were to proceed with design guidelines now, we most likely would have to procure it, given the dollar value. We intend, Mr. Long and I intend on issuing the RFP in the next week or two for the official plan. So in terms of timing, it would probably be, to be honest, the official plan process would probably get off before an RFP for the design guidelines, just because of how much of the work plan we've had prepared. We would have to scope out what the urban design guidelines look like. I would really emphasize that we do have the developers at the table We are also retaining consultants to peer review all of the studies from the elite secondary plan. And that could be one thing where the city takes on a bit of a cost and provides kind of more detailed urban design guidelines that we then feed back to elite. That could be an opportunity there.
I could go for that compromise that we're paying some and that to get this off the ground and I guess give it some elevation as to how important it was. I think that by doing that, we might have a more engaged public at that meeting to say we're already at this stage, what do you think? Instead of, here's what I think, oh, we'll have it. So if we could do that, I don't know if you need direction, Mr. Long, are you championing this right through?
Through the mayor to all of council, I would suggest that having our peer review consultants assist us with developing kind of additional design guidelines or working off the basis of elite would cost funds, and we would need direction from council to allocate some of our money for that project.
So how do I propose to do that, and maybe through you to Mr. Bowles, if that's a component of that's not in your 2025 budget, I want to make sure we get it in there and you have a number so that you don't come and we ask you that on budget night and then I'm asking for it. So could we do some of that research between the two of you?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, we can definitely do a little bit of research and give Director Bowles a number to include in the budget.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so between Gary and planning and treasury, can we just make sure that as far as, is that fine with council? Consensus is move ahead with that? That's fine. Just maybe come back with us with a report in the next little while before budget, just to give us an outline of how you see this moving forward. And then Brian can deal with the budget issue by bringing it to that. Is that fine, Mr. Bowles?
Through the mayor, if I was to give a staff remark, it's that the budget will go online next week for the community, and for council can pick up their binders next week. So
that's fine.
So it's just if a report's going to come back.
No, yeah, it's probably a report to receive. It's not that, but I think like any budgets change. So whether we add or delete things, I mean, that could be added as an appendix as we move along. We all know how that works.
100% we will incorporate.
Thanks. Okay. All right.
Thank you. And just to the presenter and to Denise, I'm glad you split this out. Actually, when you didn't split it out, I wasn't that crazy about it. But after I've gone through with these subdivision issues and the rules changing as fast as they are, I now think it was pretty clairvoyant upon you to do that, because I think it's a better system and it's also a new competition to do this. So thank you for the answers. Thank you for that.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Any further questions with regards to the presentation? Great. Thanks, Nicole. Appreciate it. So at this time, if I could have Councillors Danch and Aquilina move that the Development and Government Relations Report 2024-172 be received, that Council endorse the new official plan draft engagement strategy, draft work plan, draft vision, and key directions, objectives as the finalized terms of reference for the remaining phases of the official plan, Appendix A. Further discussion, questions, comments? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Denise, thank you. Gary, thank you. Next is item 3.2, which is the vacant land amendment to 2024 water and wastewater bylaw 2024-177. Because of my conflict, I'm passing this over to Councillor Bodner.
So for item 13.2 vacant land amendment to 2024 water and wastewater bylaw. And this is for the conflict of Mayor Steele and Councillor Danch. I think we'll move it, and I'll read it out, and then if there's any questions, we can go that way. So moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Hoyle, that Corporate Services Department Report 2024-177 be received, that council exempt vacant land that is abutting a business owned by the same beneficial owner when the land is used in the operation of that business, and that council approve these changes effective for the 2024 year and going forward. Any questions on this? Councillor Bagu.
Thank you. I guess you're Mr. Deputy Mayor. I got the right one this time. I guess to Director Bowles, how many properties will be exempted if passed? Like, I know it's got to be more than two because the mayor and the councilor took off, so there's two, at least two.
Yeah, through the deputy mayor to council, I think there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 properties impacted by this abutting property situation.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Also, you mentioned there's a deficit of $119,100 in the 2024 budget. So we're giving a refund back from beginning of the year or going forward 2025?
Yeah, through the deputy mayor to the council and council, just to clarify, so what I'm actually saying is that this means that the revenue collected will be less than the original budget, but I will be presenting to council in a couple weeks that we will be just slightly ahead of budget, even with this adjustment for the 2024 year. So it's not as if there's going to be it won't actually create a deficit in the water or wastewater budgets. But if you had have left the rate at the higher rate and had have collected the fees, you would have had a bigger surplus. So I do apologize if there was some confusion there. It's just that was the sum total of funds that you won't collect if we make this adjustment.
Thank you. To you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So just to make it plain, this is a property if somebody has a business and they could have a adjoining severed property next door to them that say they use for a parking lot. So is this what we're talking about?
Yeah, through the deputy mayor to the councillor, yes. So a property owner, just for clarity to council, could say, okay, I want to bring the two properties together and just have one property, in which case they wouldn't be subject to this vacant land charge. But for various reasons, sometimes property owners like to keep them separate, even though they're side by side. And because one is vacant, they're getting the vacant tax. But in this case, what we're proposing is these properties are actually parking lots or they're staging grounds for the company. And you couldn't operate the company without this property. So for all intents and purposes, the property really is one and the same for working purposes. It just has two separate legal titles, which is why they're getting caught up in this bylaw.
Okay, well, one more question. Now, for residents that have an adjoining property, like I have a house and I have another lot beside me that I bought years ago, and I'm paying a separate wastewater for that empty lot. But it's part of my grass and my wife's garden and blah, blah, blah. But so a resident still has to pay separate because that property is serviced but not being used. Am I correct?
Through the deputy mayor to the councillor, I think the last comment you made is the comment to which the principle of the recommendation is based on. The commercial properties are being recommended because they're being used. They're taking traffic off the roads. They're for a purpose to keep the business going. If a residential house or maybe another property that's not in this definition happens to have another property that can be developed beside it, but it's not being used, it would still receive the vacant tax.
Yeah. Okay, I'm good, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Any further questions? If not, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bodnar. So we do have, under motions, 14.1 is Councillor Bodner's burning bylaw. I'm going to go to Councillor Bodnar because he is withdrawing this, but there is a reason why. Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, when I brought this forward, I was unsure if the fire chief was actually working on this, and it turned out he was, and he's going to be bringing something to council very soon. So there's no sense in me going forward with this. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any notices of motion this evening? Okay. Staff remarks. Madam Clerk, any remarks tonight?
Nothing tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Shapowski.
Yes, through your worship. So at our last council meeting, we briefly discussed the Friendship Trail signage, and I wanted to let council know that the sign designs are being finalized over the next 2 weeks, which will then be printed and installed on the already erected post by the end of October. Regarding the Pleasant Beach retaining wall, our contractor, Rankin Construction, is planning to mobilize to the site in October, pending a permit approval from the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. The road end will be closed during construction for the safety of the public, and the closure is planned to last approximately 6 weeks. Next, Peters Excavating will be completing the city's 2024 water main replacement program, which includes water main replacement on Homewood Avenue, Berkeley Avenue, West Street, and Davis Street. The contractor will be mobilizing to the Homewood Avenue site over the next 2 weeks to begin construction. Homeowners impacted will have received notices from the city and OZA inspections to outline the work being completed and to also book pre-construction inspections of their home. You'll also note that there has been significant sewer lining operations taking place in the Rosemount area over the last month. Our contractor, Capital Sewer Services, has been consistently on site cleaning the sewers so they are able to be lined interior. We want to thank the public for their cooperation in conducting this work, and also note that last week marked our 8th kilometer of sewer being realigned, which is great. And lastly, the city will be starting our wastewater lateral CCTV launch program in October. This program will identify issues within the wastewater pipes between the sewer main and the resident's home. The program will take place in priority areas identified through the extensive flow monitoring programs that have taken place over the last year. This is all part of the city's strategy to combat inflow and infiltration in the wastewater system. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Mr. Bowles, anything tonight?
Through you, Mayor, I can comment on the homework assignment I was given earlier from Councillor Bruno, and just in full credit, I have the answer because Councillor Bagu had asked a similar question a couple weeks ago. And he was asking us about the CIPs. So Bram Cotton, our Economic Development Officer, and Andrew Hawkins, our Customer Service and Revenue Manager, have spent some time on it. So the property that we were talking about would generate about $800,000 in property taxes going forward. And an interesting statistic, which we can talk about more during the budget, is the total of all the CIPs that have been approved by council will generate, once they get fully implemented, $4.5 million in property taxes for the city, which is about 16% in new revenue without a property tax increase to the current taxpayers. So it's a very good program that I think is going forward, and that gives some context to the kind of productivity it's generating.
Mr. CAO?
Through your worship to council, just one quick item to reiterate your comments, but from the staff perspective about the return of Charlotte. Charlotte, our clerk, has been in my office a couple of times already, just since returning, making a work plan for the next short, medium, and long term, and talking about all the fun things that she's going to be working on all the way up to and including the next election and then beyond. So we've been talking about those things, but truly, truly thankful to Carol Schofield, who acted in her absence and is going to stay on for a little while, taking care of some special projects. I remember standing, it came as a bit of a surprise to us that we were losing our acting clerk who was on a contract to finish the maternity leave. Even though I gave her a reference for her new job, it came as it was a tight timeline. And I remember standing at the top hat ceremony, talking to Carol on my phone, saying, do you want to come and come back to work and do a little bit of work for Port Colborne? And over a couple of days, we agreed on that, and she's helped us with so many things. The job of clerk, in addition to the things that the mayor said, it's a little bit like herding cats, getting the folks who write reports to get all their stuff on the agenda on time. She sat on subcommittees of staff. She helped with short-term rentals, bylaw preparation, lodging bylaw, which is coming back to council soon. Many, many things that have been at this table have been thanks to Carol's efforts, and she did a really, really good job. I'm glad to see her able to stay for a little while and help with some special projects. And so kudos to her, and thanks to Charlotte for coming back. Welcome back.
Thanks, Scott. So we're now going to councillors' remarks or questions. I'll start on my right this week. Councillor Aquilina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to also welcome Charlotte back and say thank you to Carol for all the work that she's done. I don't have very much other than I'd like to thank AK and staff for organizing a site tour last week, and it was very informative. There was a few of us that went, and it was I guess striking the size of everything. So it was a great opportunity. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Borgard? Councillor Bagu?
Thank you, Mayor. Just one thing, I do apologize to Steve. I did give you a heads up on this, but I've had quite a few people now talk to me about sidewalks. I know we're grinding some down that are really bad, but what these people are asking, and I agree with them, is can the city concentrate, or actually, are they concentrating on the complaints that are coming in? I know there's trips that maybe the crack isn't big enough to standard to get the big grinder down there, and these are the ones that people are concerned about. People are klutzy, I'm klutzy, Councillor Bruno definitely is. And, we fall and trip and lose our bearings quite a bit. And I think what these people are suggesting, and I agree with them, is are we concentrating on these little blips too on the sidewalks, or just waiting for them to get big and then we get the big grinder in?
Mr. Shapowski.
Yes, through your worship. So what we do is each year we do an inspection of every piece of sidewalk that we have within the city. And what we do is we collect that data and we actually put it in our GIS system. So we have points of where every trip hazard is in the city. We basically categorize it based on the extent of what it is. If it's in excess of what the minimum maintenance standards outlines as being a surface delineated surface, then we'll repair it right away. If it's less than that, then we categorize it that it's not the priority that it needs to be, because we're focusing on the priority being anything in excess of what the minimum maintenance standard outlines. So we're not necessarily, I don't want to say we're ignoring any requests, but we're prioritizing the ones that need to be done within the allowed budget that we have.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So if somebody trips and does a faceplant on a sidewalk, and then you guys puts a complaint in, the city looks at it and says, well, it's not really bad enough yet, so we don't touch it until it gets bigger. And I think this is what the people are talking about. Like, we got to fix the little ones, even if we spend a whole year just going through the whole city and concentrating on all the ones, not just when it reaches, when it reaches a half an inch or something like that on one side. 'Cause I've seen ones where it's slanted, but I've seen the girl this year paint the things on a scooter. And of course the paint's more off now because the canal days is over. So you can't recognize at nighttime in low light in the mornings now where those little cracks are. And I know you're getting complaints, and I'm just hoping we're taking care of all the complaints that are coming in to City Hall, like through customer service and going forward to Public Works. So maybe just take a look again at it and give me an email or something. Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
May I suggest, Councillor, the budget's coming up. If you want to increase the sidewalk budget, that maybe you have Mr. Shapowski bring some numbers to budget with regards to if you want to increase your levels of service on what that would cost. And probably a timeline as far as how far out it would take us to fix all that based on their kind of worst first scenario and moving down the line. So it's a great question, but it is a budget item. So
I have no problem bringing it up at budget, Mr. Mayor. It depends what all the other budget says. And Director Bowles was looking at me like you're goofy. You ain't getting it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Doesn't stop us from putting it on the floor. We know that, right, Councillor? Councillor Bruno.
No, I was going to say ditto everything Councillor Aquilina said on the thank yous, but I have no local issues right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott? Councillor Danch?
Yeah, it's been a prosperous week. A few things looked after. I just want to give a shout out to Carter in bylaw there. He looked after a situation on Neff Street there this morning. I don't know where these people are coming from, but they're almost out on the street. 6:30 in the morning, I walked by them, and their condition wasn't good, but Carter was excellent. He was there quick, and I just want to say thank you. That's
Great.
it.
Thank you. Councillor Hoyle.
First off, thank you to the EAC and staff for the tree barrel giveaway that we did on September 14th for most of the day. It was a hot day. Secondly, I have a question for Mr. Bowles or Steve. The arena, the rubber mats that are deteriorating, showing floor, and become a safety issue. Can we move those up and get them done, or do I have to direct staff with the support of council to get that upgraded to get it done sooner than later?
Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor. From a staff's perspective, we do have it coming forward in the capital budget to be presented and for council to vote on October 16th. I think I won't speak for the Director Shapowski, but if council was to give us direction to get that started right now, we would put the wheels in motion and you could do the formal approval in a couple weeks.
Thank you. I would like to proceed with that. So I'd like to
move that we speed up the replacement of the bench.
Before someone gets hurt.
Rubber flooring. Councillor Borgard, would you second that? Okay. Questions from council with regards to that? So what we're doing is we're moving the timeline of, instead of waiting till after the budget's passed, do it now as hockey season starting because of the deterioration of the rubber mats in the bench areas to get that sped up. My understanding is staff can get that done a lot quicker if we do it now as opposed to waiting. They can get out to tender now. Any questions with regard to either Councillor Hoyle or Director Bowles? Okay, no questions. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. You can go to tender tomorrow, right? Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Hoyle? Thanks. Councillor Botter?
No, all good, thank you.
Great, thank you. So we do have bylaws 19.1, 19.2, 19.3, and 19.4. I have to pull 19.2 and let Councillor Bodner as Deputy Mayor deal with that one with regards to the conflict Councillor Danch and I have. So if I could move, have Councillors Beauregard and Bagu move bylaws 19.1, 19.3, and 19.4. Questions on those? All in favor? That's carried. Councillor Bodnar, item 19.2, or bylaw 19.2.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hang on. So this is the bylaw that amends the bylaw for the supply of water and to provide for maintenance and management of waterworks. Am I on the right one?
That's correct.
Yes, I am. Yes, okay. Yep. So it's a bylaw that the mayor and Councillor Danch have a conflict with. Any questions to that bylaw? All in favor? Carried. Did we need a mover and a second, or can we use the same? Oh. We can use the same one. Councillor Elliott, you're okay? Councillor Hoyle, okay? Good. Yep. Okay. Good.
Carried.
Carried.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Bodnar. All right, well, we thank everybody for joining us this evening, those that attended in the gallery and those that watched us on WeeStream, thank you, and we'll see you at our October meeting, and stay safe, and we're adjourned.